I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sab podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Welcome back, fam. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Twitter, and Rockfin. What is up, guys? We have big news tonight, obviously. I feel like I can't keep up with the news cycle because so much is happening since it is election season. But welcome back. We have quite a bit to discuss. I do want to start off by giving shout outs to people in the chat, and I do want to give you a quick update. This Thursday, I will not be live at my usual time because I'm actually going to be on the Jill Stein VP announcement panel Thursday evening with my comrade JB Font and Nick Cruz from Revolutionary Blackout Network. So don't miss that. There's going to be other people a part of that panel as well. I'll send it out in my newsletter to promote it for you guys, but I did just want to give you a big heads up about that. So after tonight, the next time you'll see me live is on Friday. Anywho, want to go ahead and give shout outs to people in the chat. Let's dive in. Greetings to King Young, says, can't wait till 7 p.m. Well, you are here, King. Ding, ding, ding. Greetings, Jennifer. Walz is probably better than Kamala, but I don't know that much about him. Well, you are going to find out a lot tonight because I'm going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. I see a lot of people promoting all the good things that Governor Walz has done. Some things have been misrepresented, but I'm going to tell you all of it, not just what I think is going to make people feel great. You need to know everything, not just the good stuff. Greetings, David. Sabby, he is my governor. But the worst thing of all, there is a scandal called Feeding Our Future that he is kind of involved in. Interesting. Shout out to New York Varsity. Major news outlets are saying that Joe Rogan is predicting a Harris win. The problem is they are using a clip of him talking about Gabbard. They manipulated it to make it look like he's talking about Harris. Oh my God, that is crazy. I was about to say, I don't think Joe Rogan would have said that, but this all makes sense now. That's crazy, man. That's wild. Hopefully he said something about that. Shout out to Qquita. The elites doing their job, putting to fight working class against each other. UK in chaos, protesters using anti-immigrant sentiment, same happening in the US. Yeah, we're going to get into the craziness that happened in the UK. Shout out to Dr. Darnell. Vice President Kamala Harris picking Governor Tim Walz was a good pick. However, the third party movement will continue and all third party candidates will be on the ballot in all 50 states. We shall see, won't we, Dr. Darnell? Won't we? Mm-hmm. Shout out to my comrade JB Font. What's sad is that many in indie media are essentially turning their backs on the Palestinians for vibes. Genocide was never their red line. They just lied to us. Have a good show, Sab. We're going to talk about that tonight as well. Shout out to Y'all Ain't Ready. I like that. America ain't voting for a woman, period. But I'll be voting for Jill Stein. We'll see. I'm going to show you some couple of things tonight that you may change your mind on that. Greetings, 7 little 7 boo 7. For the poll question, I am not the right person to answer, but not sure. or you put you're not sure. I don't even understand how Trump is an option and Kamala is just a different flavor of fascism, no matter her VP or who her VP is. Interesting. Shout out to Hannah G says Tuesday with Sabby. What's going on? Greetings, Lawrence says free Palestine. Shout out to Thon says, oh snap, Walz amazing, but I still hate Kamala. I will not bite blue bait, but green bait got me good. Jill Stein 2024. Shout out to Dublin says, who the hell is Tim Walz? You'll find out tonight. Shout out to Gayla and thank you for the super chat. Love you, Sab. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much. Greetings. Mark Pusley, thank you. Sab, I heard Tusker and Nick saying that they couldn't stand the voters panel. I felt the same way. No shade on you. Just some people are effed up. I know some people really like the panel. Some people didn't like the panel. But like I told you on this show, you're not going to only hear from people that you agree with. That's how this show goes. I am going to do another panel, another Black voters panel, hopefully with different people next time around. And I'm also going to do a third party panel as well. So we got a lot of things coming up, Yeah, so stay tuned. Greetings, Me Want Tacos. The Walz story is going to be last. Watch. Oh, Me Want Tacos. Oh, Me Want Tacos. Greetings, Nikki World says, hello, everyone. Shout out to Bryce Smith said, what up, Sadie? What up, everyone? Shout out to Deneen says, hey, Sabby and chat. Greetings, Berlana says, hey, everyone. Shout out to Crom says, happy Taco Tuesday, Sabby. Let the haters of your panel reveal themselves as the posers of civil discourse they truly are. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I call it hater. I think that some people just only want to hear from people that agree with them. They only want to hear from people that are in their bubble. They don't want to hear from people that they disagree with. But the reality is, this is the world that we live in. There are going to be people that you disagree with, right? All right. And I think my guest is here. So whenever you are ready, Ahmad, whenever you're ready, if you can just give me a thumbs up, I'll bring you in. Okay, great. So my special guest tonight is part of the abandoned Biden campaign. And I want to go ahead and bring him in. Ahmad, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Sorry for my delay. Sorry for being late.
Oh, no worries. I'm glad to have you here. I'm pretty sure as you've been paying attention, just like a lot of us have, I know you were a part of the abandoned Biden campaign. Given the recent switch, now that the Democrat candidate is Kamala Harris and not Joe Biden, I'm curious where this movement now stands. How do you feel about Kamala Harris now assuming this position? And do you still feel that you would abandon her as well when it comes to this issue in Gaza?
So when Joe Biden announced that he would no longer be seeking re-election, we put out a press release in which we made it very clear that we are not the kind of people who are going to individualize the evil that we saw these past 10 months in terms of the U.S. foreign policy in regard to Israel and Gaza. And that we didn't see Joe Biden as the sole figure who was responsible. Joe Biden was the head of the snake. There were multiple people in that administration who supported him, backed him. One of those people is Kamala Harris, who was his number two. And in regard to people who want to sort of try and distance Kamala Harris from Joe Biden's approach towards Gaza, I would point to two things. Number one, I've mentioned this multiple times before, Rifat al-Hariri, an academic in Gaza on Twitter, whose handle is iTranslate123. The last tweet that he had before Israel killed him in a missile strike was him quote tweeting Kamala Harris saying Israel has the right to defend itself with the Democratic Party is responsible for the genocide in Gaza. That's number one. Number two, I think it behooves us to pay attention to when John Kirby said in regard to Kamala Harris when he was asked about her was that she has been and still is a full partner with regard to Joe Biden's policy when it comes to Gaza and the Middle East. So again, we're not going to individualize this evil as solely being Joe Biden. When he's gone, everything is fine. No, there's an entire apparatus, there's an entire machinery there was an entire group of people who supported Joe Biden, backed him, and didn't distance themselves at any point during the last 10 months when it would have been actually courageous to do so.
I totally hear where you're coming from. That is good to hear because I will tell you the sentiment that I am hearing from people, even those that were a part of the pro-Palestinian movement, it has greatly shifted since Kamala has been announced as the candidate for the Democratic Party. And it's interesting considering none of us voted for Kamala Harris in a Democrat primary. She was just selected, just chosen, and became the nominee. And I am greatly concerned because I see a movement that once again seems to have been co-opted by the Democratic Party, and they have funneled that energy back into the Democratic Party. The last time I saw this was the George Floyd protest, of course. There were a number of demands from people on the ground. And the moment that Joe Biden won, a lot of those protesters went right back home and those demands were not met. Now I'm seeing this happen again since the announcement of Kamala Harris. And I'm not speaking to the people who are watching right now that are Democrat Party loyalists, because I expect you to vote for the Democratic Party. Same thing if you're a Republican Party loyalist, you're going to vote for the party regardless of who the candidate is. But I'm speaking to the people that were pro-Palestinian activists on the ground with people like myself who have now all of a sudden decided that genocide is not a red line. And it is really upsetting to me because I don't think, for whatever reason, people are not making the connection that you just laid out, Ahmad, that she is very much complicit in this. She is very much a part of it. Why do you feel that people are just ready to flip?
I think people were looking for an excuse to flip. I think, and I mentioned this on Bad Faith podcast, the average person needs to look internally and deeply within themselves to assess, are they really willing to put what matters on the line for what they claim to be are their principles and their morals and their ethics, or are they just fine with optics? I think we saw this during the Barack Obama presidency. There really was no anti-war movement. We saw this again during Joe Biden's 4 years. People seemed content to just coast by as everything was happening. And I bring this up in the sense that what we're hearing now in terms of people trying to emotionally manipulate us into voting for the Democratic Party because Kamala Harris is presumptually going to be the DNC nominee for 2024 is vote for Kamala now and hold her accountable, right? Vote for the Democratic nominee and then work to hold them accountable. And people will say this as if those same individuals were also saying 4 years ago the same exact thing about Joe Biden. Not just that, but they were also saying things in the same breath, vote for Biden so that we can all go back to brunch. It's very demeaning to be spoken to in this manner, as if our memories are very short. When we did try to hold Joe Biden accountable at his rallies, we showed up and we yelled out and we started trying to hold him accountable. Those same people who were saying, vote for Biden and then hold him accountable, drowned out our shouts with chants of 4 more years, as a genocide was happening, as those images and videos of Palestinians being torn to shreds were showing up every single day, and every day was more gruesome than the last. Those people still chanted 4 more years, 4 more years. Again, we're not going to fall for old tricks. We're not going to allow ourselves to be complacent. This is not the time for people to try and push things 4 years down the line. We're going to have this conversation now. And look, it's going to be a difficult conversation, but at the same time, for those individuals that you mentioned, I would ask a very important question. In my limited experience, lesser evil voting became an actual topic around 2012 when it was between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. I'd ask those people in 2012, did you see yourself 12 years down the line minimizing a genocide? Did you really see yourself doing that? To see images 10 months in, we're now entering our 11th month, of the most gruesome brutality you could ever picture or imagine. And forget even the pictures and images, just listening to the testimonies of doctors who spent their entire life volunteering in war zones, coming back and saying that alone, that Gaza Strip alone, is worse than everything I've ever experienced combined. Did you ever see yourself minimizing that and trying to place that as one issue amongst other issues? Lesser evil voting and this mentality of lesser evil voting, people haven't noticed how it slowly made them erode morally and ethically. And I think that's an important conversation to have. And I think that's a very important question that needs to be asked.
I have to say this. Earlier today, it was announced that Kamala Harris has selected Tim Walz as her VP, as her running mate, someone who is a little to the left of her, but I will still call him a moderate. I get into that a lot later, you guys, when we get into that story. But a number of people, and including those in independent media, immediately said, yes, now she can win. I'm talking about people that have been debating Zionists since October 7th on Piers Morgan's show and other shows, people who have been talking about this conflict since October 7th in support of Gaza and the Palestinians, all of a sudden just jumped on board. And I have to ask, how do you feel about that? Because I told someone earlier today, I said, honestly, if I was Palestinian, I would be really pissed off.
Again, it goes back to the concept of optics and feel-good politics. I was very dismayed and very upset to see people immediately jump on the Kamala Harris train without her announcing a single shift in policy. She hasn't held a single press conference talking about how her policy would be different. People want to point to the fact that she did not attend Netanyahu's address. She didn't, but she met with him behind closed doors. Well, what about what she said about how she will not be silent regarding the killing and happening in Gaza? Yes, but condemnation of killing is meaningless when you're still fully willing to arm the killers. Again, this is what I mean when I talk about empty, meaningless rhetoric. People who find themselves placated by that empty, meaningless, feel-good rhetoric, I would venture as far as saying weren't any substantial allies whatsoever. They hopped off the Joe Biden train for the wrong reason. They're now endorsing Kamala Harris for the wrong reason. They're celebrating the Tim Walz pick over Shapiro for the wrong reason. And I say that in the sense that a lot of people jumped off the Joe Biden train after his June 27th debate with Donald Trump. It wasn't because of his backing, funding, endorsing, and acting as a mouthpiece for a genocidal apartheid regime. They did it because it became very clear to the country and to the entire world that he was no longer cognitively fit to lead. And so forcing him to step down, again, was for the wrong reasons. It wasn't because of his role in genocide that we're seeing now. It was because of the fact that they said our personal interests are now at stake. And now with this Tim Walz pick, and people want to frame it as though it was because Shapiro was too pro-Israeli. No, we're of the opinion actually that it was because of everything else that popped up. The Shapiro covering up a murder, a lot of skeletons in Shapiro closet that had nothing to do with Israel, quite frankly. Again, people have no idea. A couple of weeks ago, Palestinians in Minnesota, his actual constituents in Minnesota, showed up to meet with him. And when he found out that it wasn't just going to be for the sake of a photo op, and he wasn't going to be allowed to just sit there and nod his head as they talked about their trauma, they were going to have actual, tangible demands that they needed from him. That meeting was canceled. And that was a couple of weeks ago. Again, this is what we talk about when we are discussing the concept of meaningless optics. What's going on here? Why are we being placated by meaningless office, did we actually care about this in the first place? Or were we looking for a reason to take the first exit ramp off this very difficult road in order to sort of make ourselves feel good? Again, very difficult questions that need to be asked to these individuals who find themselves riding a train that is not based on any actual substance whatsoever.
And I actually have that clip. I'm glad you brought that up. Here's that clip that he is referring to. Governor Walz cancels meeting with Gazan families on the spot. Everyone listen to this.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is Sanat Waswas from AMP. I'm standing here outside of the Minnesota State Capitol with our AMP members and Gaza families here from Minnesota. And I'm just here to tell you that we were supposed to meet with Governor Walz and our meeting got canceled. We met with the staff right before then, and they were under the impression that we were going to talk about our stories and just share our stories and cry and play the victimhood narrative. But as soon as we told them that we would not just share our victimhood, but talk about how we can materially affect change, how Governor Walz can and should divest from the SBI, that's when they decided to go deliberate, and then they came back and informed us that our meeting was canceled. They used the excuse that Governor Walz just wanted to hear families tell their stories, but didn't actually want to hear about the material changes, that this would be too long of a process. We know that this is a major excuse from Governor Walz. Families have been requesting to meet with him for months and months upon end. And as we reach the 10th month, and Governor Walz has refused to express any real, genuine solidarity with the Palestinian people, has refused to call for divestment, we see that this is clearly all talk, and this is just empty words from Governor Walz, that the real reason that they canceled the meeting is that they don't actually want to take any real effort to affect freedom and liberation for Palestine.
Right. So thank you so much for bringing that up. I had this ready to go because I saw this earlier as well. But yeah, see, this is something that people are not mentioning about Governor Walz. Obviously, you were hearing from Palestinian families right there. People are leaving this out. A lot of people are just talking about some of the good things that he did for Minnesota. And there are some good things that he has done. But they're not talking about his record on Israel, which I will get into later on tonight. They're not talking about how these families have been rejected to meet with Governor Walz. These are very important things. And I think a lot of people are being gaslighted right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think people, so let me give everyone a timeline. Back when everything in Gaza started post October 7th in the mainstream media, this did not start on October 7th. This has been going on for a long, long time. Back when Abandon Biden formed, we gave Joe Biden an ultimatum. You have 2 weeks to call for and enforce a permanent ceasefire, or else we will campaign against you. October 31st came and went. That deadline was missed. It was not met. The ultimatum was not met. So we made it a point saying, from now on, we are going to campaign against Joe Biden. And from that point, from then on, up until the June 27th debate, we were subjected to some of the most grotesque rhetoric on the internet and in person and on the mainstream media that one can possibly think of. And I say that in the sense of people were saying things that if I had written it down and I said, hey, which side of the political aisle do you think this rhetoric came from? People would say, well, this obviously came from Trump supporters. It did not. It came from Joe Biden supporters. People saying things like, well, when Donald Trump deports you, don't cry about it. Or when Donald Trump does X, I'm just going to sit down and eat popcorn and watch. That's the kind of rhetoric we were subjected to when we said we're not going to vote for Joe Biden because of this genocide. And then another group started posturing, saying, well, the Palestinians aren't going to be any better under Donald Trump. And our immediate response was like, yeah, we're not voting for Donald Trump. We're saying that we're not going to vote for Joe Biden. Again, from November 1st, 2023 till June 27th, 2024, that was the rhetoric we were subjected to. After the entire nation or the entire Democratic Party seemed to flip on Joe Biden immediately post that debate, we saw a lot of that rhetoric die down immediately. But we weren't really happy because we knew it was for the wrong reasons. When Joe Biden stepped down and it was announced Kamala Harris was going to be was most likely going to be the nominee, she had received Joe Biden's endorsement, that rhetoric came back exactly as it was before then. People took a break and it came back to the same type of vitriol and variance on November 1st, 2023 until June 27th. We're under no illusions of what's going to happen if we get our way. We are under no illusions that the same people who rush to help those who were directly affected by Donald Trump's policies are going to sit back and say, well, we told you so. You should have listened to us. We understand the ramifications that come with being probably the first group, voting group in the United States in modern memory to say we will not fall into the trap of lesser evil voting. We are going to utilize our votes some other way. We understand that because the people who rushed our help in 2016 are going to sit by and do nothing. And the party whose sole platform relies on them saying, look how bad the other side is, needs to ensure that this group that decided to break away from the status quo is made an example of. We can't have other minority voters in the United States of America saying, well, they did it, why can't we? Why can't we withhold our vote? Why can't we leverage our vote? Why can't we have actual demands that are beyond crumbs? We're very well aware of that. And I don't know what the future holds. I really don't. But all I know is that morally, ethically, we cannot, in good conscience, vote for the party that has been fully complicit in this genocide led by Joe Biden.
I totally hear you. And I was very skeptical of some of the media figures that decided to come out and support the pro-Palestinian movement after October 7th, because even before October 7th, there were a couple of us in indie media that we were talking about what was happening between Israel and the Palestinians years ago. I think that the very first time I covered it on this show was the first year of this show. And I remember back then a number of people telling me that this was not an important issue. And it was interesting to me that all of a sudden after October 7th, a number of people just jumped on this topic and all of a sudden was pro-Palestinian and save and protect the Palestinian people when they didn't care about it prior to October 7th. And now some of those same people are the ones that are willing to just say, forget this, we're just going to vote for Kamala Harris. It's really sad. And I think it's pathetic because if you say that genocide is a red line, then that means it's a red line. And that doesn't mean you go vote for Donald Trump. You don't have to vote for anyone. But I'm curious what that would look like for you. I've been trying to tell people that if genocide is a red line for you, then and you do want to vote, you should support the third party or independent candidates that are running correctly on this issue. And I'm curious, when it comes to the Abandon Biden movement, is it moving in that direction, or do you think more people are likely to stay at home?
So when we talk about the Muslim American community, you need to realize that this is a community that has voted majority Democrat for about 24 years. Around 2 decades. And so when this movement emerged, we realized that we are now talking to people on a wide political spectrum. And so our message had to start very basic, and then our goal was to take the voter on a journey in which they, from November 1st, 2023, up until November 2024, the day of the election, their attitude and their belief and their outlook towards what a vote actually is changes. I need to emphasize, we are not sitting here saying that voting is the end all be all. We are not these groups that pop up every 4 years and say, you want change, vote. There's a lot of work that happens. But again, a punch consists of a fist, ideally with 5 fingers, right? One of those fingers is voting. There's a lot of other work that has to go. But voting is a voice, is a tool that we have. Now, the people who are willing to stand in line at the polls and vote, we'll tell them, look, it's not either or. It's not either or. you can vote some other way, even if you stand in line at the poll and just write Gaza or write Free Palestine. The important thing is that you are tallied as someone who is willing to stand in line and take hours out of your day to cast a vote. Now, we do have some individuals who say, well, I am discontent with both parties. I'm just going to sit at home. There is no good in electoral politics whatsoever. And to those people, our message has sort of been around the idea of, look, here's an example that we have. In terms of business, right? There is a cost to acquire a customer and there is a cost to retain a customer. Acquiring a customer is much more expensive than retaining a customer. So if I, as a politician, am looking at a constituency and I see the non-voters, number one, I need to allocate two types of resources. The first is to convince them to vote. And let's say I spend that resources to convince them to vote. There's no guarantee that they're going to vote for me. They may vote for my opponent. So now I have to spend resources to get them to vote and then more resources to convince them to vote for me. My ideal situation with these non-voters is I don't care what they want, what concerns they have. I don't care about any of that. I'd like them just to stay out of the race. Now, the people who do vote, the people who do stand in line, the people who do take out the time to cast the ballot, I will allocate my resources towards convincing them why they should vote for me. And so in convincing these non-voters within our community, we tell them, if you want your voice heard, one of the ways of doing it is through voting. It is not necessarily the most important way or the most effective way, but it is a way, a tool, a method that needs and should be utilized along with other methods and other tools. We have had some people who have expressed some sort of skepticism in regard to third-party voting. Abandoned Biden has not endorsed any third parties. Our message has solely been about getting people to vote their conscience and to actually put forth the effort into using this voice. But for the people who have expressed some sort of skepticism around casting a vote outside of the two-party system, our message to them is, look, it does not matter if you vote for the Democrats enthusiastically. It does not matter if you vote for the Democrats apathetically. It does not matter if you vote for the Democrats in disgust. It does not matter if you vote for the Democrats and then get online and talk about how much you hated the fact that you had to vote for the Democrats. A vote is a vote. They don't care how they got it. They got it from you. Now we don't have to see you for the next 4 years. We got it from you, and now what we're going to do is the same tactics that we use right now to get you to vote for us. We're going to ramp it up in 4 years to ensure that we still have your vote. So it doesn't matter what emotion you have in your heart when you vote for that party. They got what they wanted out of you. You're not going to get anything that you want out of them. And so the idea of this movement is, the goal is not to win. The goal is to change the conversation. And I brought this example up on Bad Faith Pod. Bernie Sanders, who, to be fair, has absolutely disappointed me with his stance since October 7th. Credit to Brianna, his former press secretary, for calling him out immediately on that. That's what holding someone accountable is. That's what courage is. Bernie Sanders lost in 2016 and he lost in 2020. However, the conversations surrounding the issues that he was campaigning on, the way they were spoken about in 2015 was not the same way they were spoken about in 2021. A massive shift in the conversation took place, a massive shift in rhetoric, all within a span of 6 years, which really isn't that long. Again, is our goal to win, or is our goal to change the conversation?
So if the goal is to change the conversation, because I mention this a lot because I'm anti-duopoly, like I'll be supporting third parties. And I came from that Bernie movement, but I just saw that there was just no movement within the Democratic Party with the progressivism, et cetera, because of big money interests. But if the goal is to shift the conversation, why do you feel there is some skepticism among those that are part of the abandoned Biden campaign to vote for third party?
you're talking about a community that has been indoctrinated for a long, long time with the mentality of lesser evil voting. And so breaking them out of that is going to take some time. It's going to take some effort. It's going to take some patience. We have been conditioned to think and to believe that in order to enact any type of change, you need to win. And by win, I mean win an election. And if you're not going to win an election, then what's the point? The point, again, is not to win. The point is to start something. The point is to do something. The point is to change the conversation little by little. So, for example, in regards to the example I said with Bernie Sanders, people who are old enough to remember how things like universal health care was talked about in 2014, as opposed to how it was talked about now, two completely different conversations being had on polar, like, opposites. Again, this is going to take some time. This is going to take some effort, and it's going to take some patience, because people do genuinely believe that in order to actually have any type of change, you need to win. And we're trying to help people internalize the idea that change does not come when you compromise with evil. It doesn't. The only change that does happen when you compromise with evil is the change within you as an individual. You change worse little by little by little, and you don't realize it. And I even hate to say compromising with evil, because in a compromise, both sides give something up. But in this concept of lesser evil voting, we, the voters, are the only ones giving something up. We're the only ones giving anything up. It's not really a compromise, it's a capitulation, to be fair.
I totally hear you there. It sounds like we have a similar situation, because this is something that I've tried to explain to the African American community as well, that we keep voting for the Democratic Party, and whenever you ask, well, is there a Black agenda, or what are you going to do for the Black community? It's the same thing as to, like, there's a lot of virtue signaling from the Democratic Party, I think, a lot of virtue signaling, but no real tangible results, no real change. But I get the same response as to, this is what we have been doing for so long. And people do feel as though, well, at least it's not the Republicans. So I totally hear what you're talking about. Like, it's a long time that people have been indoctrined into believing and feeling a certain way. So I totally hear where you're coming from about that. I worry. Do you worry what is going to happen as we get closer to November? I did not think this war in Gaza would last for as long as it has. I mean, we're coming up on a year, you guys, and I don't think at this point that this will be resolved before November, before the election. Do you worry about that? And are you concerned about what's happening in the greater scheme of things in the Middle East right now, where it's no longer just Israel is attacking Palestinians in Gaza? Now there is a conflict between Hezbollah and Israel, and also Iran.
Yeah, I'm actually very worried about the condition of the wider region. And I do believe it was a mistake to not force Joe Biden to step down from the presidency altogether, because this man is an ideologue. And he is surrounded by individuals who are also ideologues. I'm talking about Antony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, Brett McGurk. A report came out saying that Kamala Harris, if she wins, would not retain Antony Blinken and Jake Sullivan. And so you have three individuals, Joe Biden, Antony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, who know it's their final couple months in office to actually push through the vision for the Middle East that they have. And they will do it at any cost. So basically, we're giving someone tools and telling them you have 4 or 5 months left. What did we think was going to happen? They're going to run amok. And we're all going to have to pay the price for it, because they're like, well, I'm not going to be in office in 4 or 5 months. Let me just go full speed ahead, pedal to the metal. There is a concern. The closer we get to November 5th, will the Muslim American community be placated by Joe Biden stepping down and not seeking re-election, by Kamala Harris's softer, little bit softer rhetoric, by her selecting Walz. I don't know. But I do know is that we are still paying attention to the brutality that is taking place in Gaza right now. We are still listening to the testimonies of the doctors who are coming out of Gaza right now. Doctors who are saying, never in my life have I seen what I saw there. And while I've always been prepared for war zones, I was not prepared for the amount of children I saw being shot in the head by snipers twice. So it's not a mistake. It's not an accident. It's a deliberate killing. It's a deliberate massacre that's taking place. We're paying attention to this. We're still cognizant of what's going on. I can't speak for every single individual within the Ban Biden movement. I can't speak on behalf of every Muslim American voter within the United States of America. But I will say this. The election is going to be in November. In October, we're going to revisit the annual anniversary of certain things that took place due to the rhetoric that came out from Joe Biden and the Democrats. And I'll give you one of those. The stabbing of a 6-year-old boy 26 times in Chicago by his parents' landlord because of Joe Biden's dehumanizing rhetoric, because of the viciousness and brutality that we saw in Gaza that was backed by almost every single Democrat in October. We are going to revisit those moments, and we're going to remember how we felt, the helplessness that we felt, the anger we felt, the sadness and the rage that we felt. We're going to remember that. And we are insistent that we are going to send a message. If you run on genocide, you will not win.
I think that is a great message to send. I have to tell you, I am been very disappointed, but not surprised with the way that our government has responded to all of this. And I say this because for years, I've watched the US government not hold Israel accountable. The last time that I read that this happened was under Ronald Reagan, when there was air fire between Israel and Lebanon at that point in time. And there was some public outcry. So because there was some public outcry, Ronald Reagan said, nope, you got to stop. You can't continue this, right? Now that's like even impossible to think of our politicians like pushing for something like that. And this whole rhetoric around a ceasefire, the way that they have spoken about this, the Biden-Harris administration, it's mainly a temporary pause. It's not a permanent ceasefire. I think they've been deceiving a lot of people with that as well. And I'm curious how you feel about the way the media has handled this situation, because I noticed that they slowly over time decided to stop covering it. And I had a feeling this was going to happen. This happened during the George Floyd protests. They were covering it heavily at first. Then when more and more people came out into the streets, they're like, okay, we need to kind of scale it back now, not give it as much attention. And so if you are not out there with the protesters, you think in your mind, just by watching mainstream media, oh, it's all over. No one's talking about it right now. But people are still protesting against Israel and against the genocide. How do you feel about the way the media has handled the coverage of the genocide of the Palestinian people?
From the very beginning until now, the mainstream American media has acted as an extension, as a mouthpiece for the Israeli government, which is shocking because it's become apparent that if you want to see any reporting that is critical of the Israeli government, you have to actually read Israeli newspapers. Passing off what the Israeli government says as verifiable fact, time and time and time again, means that the US mainstream media is complicit. And it's not an accident. It's not a mistake. It's purposeful because it's a consistent theme that's happened throughout my entire lifetime, but specifically since October 7th. And we're talking about a genocide that is being live streamed and broadcast on social media. And so you have an instance where the Israeli government drops a bomb on a refugee camp, killing 400 people, and saying, oh, well, there was Hamas terrorists there. No journalistic due diligence, no investigation, no follow-up question, nothing. Just, okay, this is what they said. This is what we're going to pass off as fact. It's frustrating to see, but in the little twist of irony is the fact that this is happening in the age of social media. Back before social media, it used to be just passed off as absolute fact, and no one questioned it. And the average American, in their view of Israel and Palestine, they had built it upon what they were seeing on their news channels, what they were hearing from their favorite newscaster. But now we live in an age where the Israeli military will say, well, look at this paper on the wall. This is a list of names of terrorists. They are, it's a schedule to watch the hostages. I saw that as soon as it was broadcast, and I immediately said, no, that is a calendar. That says Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Such egregious lying. And it gets passed off as fact by what we consider to be credible news agencies. Listen, a lot of people don't know this, but mouthpieces for genocide can also be tried for war crimes at The Hague. And I think that's something we need to keep in mind. Complicitness isn't necessarily in the sense that you are pulling the trigger or that you are providing the weapons or the bullets. Complicitness also extends to being the mouthpiece that whitewashes these crimes, that excuses these crimes, that tries to paint a picture that says, well, what you saw isn't actually a crime. It was an act of self-defense. And look, the last 11 months have been extremely difficult, extremely disheartening, emotionally taxing, emotionally draining. But all I can say is when I compare it to what happened in 2014, the rhetoric has shifted magnanimously in the other direction.
One more thing for you, if you had the opportunity to speak to Zionists, and I don't even want to go into like the Zionists that are part of administration, just in general, people that support Zionism, because I do not, and people that have been conditioned to believe that it is their right to have that land. What would you say to them?
I've been speaking to Zionists my entire life. I am a Palestinian. I've had to put up with this from the day I was born until now. Two things. And maybe I'm coming off a little harsh, but this is something that needs to be said. Anyone who's still on the fence 11 months later is not someone I would think is worth talking to, is not someone whose opinion I care about, is not someone whose feelings I'm going to pay any kind of attention to. We're 11 months into a live stream genocide where we are seeing a level of brutality that quite often you don't even see in films. You're seeing it happen in real life. And I want to remind everyone, I listened to an interview in Arabic by Al Jazeera journalist Wa'il al-Dahdouh, who was a journalist whose family was targeted in Gaza, and Israel tried to target him, and they got him out and into Qatar right now. He said something that sent a chill up my spine. He said, everything you see, we were not allowed to broadcast or report on 90% of what we saw. What we're seeing now is 10%. That death toll that you're seeing that's still stuck at 40,000, it's stuck at 40,000 for a reason, because Israel destroyed the Gaza Ministry of Health. My personal opinion, if this genocide were to end today, we'd be at around 210,000 Palestinians killed. That's a tenth of Gaza's population, decimated. There's a lot that can be said to people who feel like this is my land, so on and so forth. Look, Israel has made no secret of the fact that this is an actual land theft. Their politicians have said it, their citizens have said it, their mouthpieces have said it, that they said this is a blatant land grab. From the very initial inception of Zionism, Theodor Herzl in his manifesto talks about that, yeah, this land has natives and they may resist our colonization attempts. The mentor of Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, Zev Jabotinsky, wrote in a letter saying, look, these Arabs are going to resist our attempts to colonize them and to steal their land because we are colonizers and conquerors. He says this openly in a letter. They've made no secret of who they are and what their attempts are and what their intentions are and what they'd like to see happen to the Palestinians, who are the indigenous native population. A lot of people have been surprised at the rhetoric coming out of Israel. And I've told them, I was like, look, this is stuff that's been said all along. The only difference is it was said in Hebrew. And those of us who spoke Hebrew knew exactly what was being said. And now all of a sudden that there is a translate feature on social media where you can see what Israeli elected officials, not individuals, elected officials are saying. They're writing it out in Hebrew. You click translate and you're like, I'm sorry, is this a lost page out of the most genocidal book ever written? It's horrific. And I think people understand this wasn't just said now. This has been said the entire time. We just now have the tools to immediately translate what's being said.
That's right. Ahmad, thank you so much for coming on. I really do appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys, that was Ahmad. He is a part of the Abandon Biden campaign. It was really great to talk to him, and shout out to those of you who put me in touch with him, because again, I told you guys, if you notice, corporate media is slowly walking away from discussing it. They have thrown shiny new things in front of you. Right now, that shiny new thing for a lot of people is Kamala Harris, and that is to distract you from what is going on. There is still a genocide that is happening in Gaza. People are still being killed. Israel is still stealing land and homes from Palestinians in the West Bank. That has not changed. If anything, they have ramped up what they have been doing before, because now they're attacking Hezbollah again as well. So we cannot pretend that this is no longer happening and everything is just subdued. It's not subdued. But shout out to Ahmad for so much for coming on. Thank you so much. I want to go ahead and give a shout out. We're going to do a shout out to patrons, and then we're going to show the thumbnail, and I'll go to the comments, and we'll get to the other stories tonight. We will do, I wasn't going to do call in tonight, but then I remember the whole thing with my car. So I am going to do call in tonight after the show. So we'll get into all of that. So shout out to all of you that are Sabby patrons. Thank you so much for your support. I really do appreciate you around here. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: ultimate, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters. Some of you may wonder who came up with these names. It was me. Of course, Sabbies. And of course, don't forget, there are also members as well. Thank you guys so much for your support. And I do want to give a shout out to other Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Samantha and Darren Nelson. Thank you so much. And welcome. Welcome, folks. Based. All right. Let's go ahead and show that thumbnail so you can see what else we're going to discuss tonight. I have 4 news stories I want to cover. Yeah. Here we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are also discussing Kamala Harris picks Tim Walz. We're going to break that down. I'm going to get into a little bit of detail about who Tim Walz actually is. I'm seeing a number of people cheerleading for him online, and they're showing some of the positive things that he's done for people in Minnesota. But I think I'm going to show you the good, the bad, and the ugly. You need to see fully who Tim Walz is. People are touting him as a progressive. This guy is not a progressive, and I'm going to show you why. We're also going to discuss Antony Blinken is ready to defend Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, the U.S. is preparing right now to defend Israel. They are sending troops to the Middle East. I'm going to tell you why this is concerning to all of us. Again, this is escalating in the Middle East. There's also information coming about that Russia is willing to get involved if need be. I'm not kidding when I tell you they're trying to take us closer and closer to World War III. We're also going to discuss Professor Richard Wolff, the stock market crash. So the stock market that crashed the other day, I'm pretty sure some of you may have heard about this. This is a global effect. We're going to get into what caused that crash and also a lesson that I think we could have learned from Professor Richard Wolff, because he tried to warn us what we were heading into. And last but not least, craziness has been happening in the UK. Like, it is wild. I saw videos on social media and I was like, what the hell is happening in the UK? So there were riots going down in the UK where people absolutely just lost it. So that is a picture there of Keir Starmer. We're going to get into that as well. Got to break down that discussion. It is crazy. It is wild out here in these streets. Yeah. So let's go to some of the comments here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the super chat, Perry. You can either be for identity politics or revolutionary politics, but you can't be for both. To hell with Kamala, free Palestine. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Cup of Joy. Walz is no better than any Zionist, just nicer and likes dogs. Likes dogs. He will support continuing the genocide. He was picked for ops only and won't upstage Kamala. Another duopoly ghoul. Hashtag Jill Stein 2024. Yeah, I have a lot to show you about Tim Walz. N3N. Hi, Sabby. Sending love from California. Welcome. David says Tim Walz is a John Fetterman Democrat. There it is. There it is. And remember, I warned people about John Fetterman when he was running for office, right? Mike, I don't care who Kamala chooses as her VP. I am not supporting her, period. Mike is letting everybody know. Wake up, US. Kamala said today in so many words in Philadelphia that she is not going to do anything for the Black community. I'm trying to tell you over and over again, folks. I've been trying to tell people this. What are you voting for? If you're voting for her because you're expecting to get something for your community, I think you need to think again. Thank you for the super chat, Phyllis Foster. Sabby, Tim Walz is Joe Biden 2.0. Why do people think they're getting anything other than one Zionist in place of another? Great show today. Thank you for that. And thank you, Cynical. I feel some only care about humanitarian rights when they can use it to bludgeon Republicans over the head. Ooh, that's a good point. People also forgot what Dixiecrats are. Yes, they did. And thank you for the super sticker, Divad. Thank you so much for that. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Thank you so much for that. Okay, we're going to get into our first story, ladies and gentlemen. Holy smokes. The stock market had a huge crash. And by the way, the Biden administration has continued to tell people that the economy is great. I've been debunking that for the past 3 years, especially this year. And here we go, right? Because I want to start with this clip here from CNN. And then I'm going to explain to you how the unemployment rate has something to do with the stock market crash. This is affecting the entire world right now. Let's go ahead and get into this clip here.
But as we look to Wall Street and see the Dow going down as part of this global market panic, let's begin there. And let's bring in CNN's Julia Chatterley. Julia, we hear the bell there. What's the damage?
It was an ugly day. Just to give you some context here, this is the worst trading day for stock markets in nearly 2 years. In the early minutes of the session today, we saw around $1 trillion worth of wealth wiped off just a handful of the biggest tech stocks. So ugly is the way to describe it. I won't use the word panic. This is not panic, let's be clear. But there is a palpable concern out there that the US economy is slowing far quicker than we thought. And that was fueled by, as you said, the jobs number that we got on Friday. Weaker manufacturing.
Pause. Okay. Let me just go ahead and push back on something that she said here, because she said there's no need to panic. They say this every time, right? Even when they say like, no, we're not headed towards a recession, there's no need to panic. They say this every time. But she's bringing up that jobs number report. Now, that is a pushback on Joe Biden's talking points, because he continued to tell you that the job report is great. We created all these jobs. Isn't that what he said? We created all these jobs. And I told you, they never tell you what those jobs are. They don't even tell you the sector, right? So I don't expect them to stand there and say and name each position that was created, but they can at least tell you we created a number of jobs in the tech industry or the auto services industry or something like that. They don't even do that. They just said we created all these jobs. A lot of those jobs I told you before are temp jobs, contract positions. Those are not permanent positions. And a lot of times they don't have full-time benefits, right? So just keep that in mind. But again, another example to show you they were not telling you the truth about the jobs. Let's continue.
Manufacturing data last week as well. It's raised questions about why on earth the Fed didn't cut rates last week if it knew this data was coming. And I think there's justifiable concern there. I also think we have to take a step back briefly and just say, look, we're still overall adding jobs to the US economy. No one's talking about imminent recession, but they are talking about rising risks and that the Fed should act on that. And I think they will. Now, if it were just that, I'd be tempted to suggest that there's an overreaction going on in stock markets, but the problem is it's not just that. One of the strongest pillars of the market so far this year has been the tech stocks. And we've now, for a number of days, seen a lot of people taking money off the table. They're still in profit, but they're just taking money off the table, and that's had an impact. Fast forward to what we saw last night. The Japanese stock market, that fell 12%. Now that is panic. And you don't see something like that without seeing pressure on US markets. Plus it's summertime. There's simply less investors out there. Jake, I will say there's silver linings. The conversation has changed now over the Fed. It's not about if they cut rates in September. It's about how much they do. And I think that's the right conversation to be having.
Everybody hearing this? It's not about if, it's how much they cut in September. So you see, now we are going into November presidential election. And this is why I've continued to say, if you really are running against, whether you're third party, independent, et cetera, if you are running against the Biden administration, instead of focusing on, there's a lot of people focusing on whether or not Kamala Harris is black or whatever, yada, yada, right? That is a trick by the Democratic Party that I do think Donald Trump and the Republicans fell for. That's a trick. I said, for one, focus on her record, focus on her policies or lack thereof. There's still today. I've been checking every day. There is no policy platform on her website. The focus should be more so on the economy. That is the number one issue for voters, is the economy. But I don't hear anybody talking about this. And now we have a stock market crash. It was just a month or so ago that I told you there were financial reports that revealed that we were in 2008 numbers that we had during the housing crisis. I told you back then that Joe Biden was lying about the economy. The first time I told you that was in March when that report was released. And the reality is, like, I have the time to look up that information, but the average American does not have the time to look up that information. So if you are only consuming corporate media and the president is telling you that the job numbers are great and the economy is great, you're more likely to believe it if you're not really paying attention to the economic conditions around you, especially if you have the money, right? But here we are. Let's continue.
All right, Julia Chatterley, thanks so much for that. I appreciate it. Let's discuss further with CNN Global economic analyst Rana Foroohar. Rana, So you think that this big correction in the market is not just about the jobs numbers, the disappointing unemployment number from last week. What else do you think might be at play here?
Well, the question is, what isn't at play? I mean, Julia is absolutely right that tech is a big part of this story. I said back in March that I thought that AI in particular, which is the story that's been driving the gains in a lot of those tech stocks, may have been overblown. That's not to say it's not going to pay off, but it's not going to pay off tomorrow. It's not going to pay off next quarter. This is a 10-year story. And I think the markets are starting to recognize that, particularly as earnings come in, and there have been some disappointing numbers in recent days. We also have an incredibly precarious geopolitical situation out there right now. And with Kamala Harris making gains now in the presidential race and looking stronger, I think a lot of investors that may have been thinking, oh, I'm going to get a Trump 2 administration, maybe there's going to be tax cuts for corporates, they're maybe rethinking that. So there's just a lot in play. And of course, there is also some data, and this is important to suggest that there is a slowdown in the U.S. economy. Let me say, I'm not overly worried about that. I mean,
Pause. Did you hear what she just said? There is a slowdown in the American economy, which is what I have been saying. The Biden administration has been lying to you about the economy. Now, then she goes on to say, I'm not really worried about that. You should be. You should be. When prices are high and there's a slowdown in the economy, you should be concerned about that.
We have frankly been due, I think, for a bit of a slowdown. We've had an incredibly robust recovery, but I would want to see another one or two data points to support that before I would say, yes, this is a big deal. This is a recession.
So some economic analysts point out that the market is not the same thing as the economy. They're related,
sure,
but it's not the same thing. And they're arguing that investors are overreacting right now. You agree with that?
I do totally agree with that. And I would also say there's an entire generation, multiple generations actually, of investors that have never been in the market in a period of rising interest rates. So, they look at, over 4% interest rates and say, oh my gosh, the sky's falling, and we need to lower them again. Well, let's take it one step at a time. This Fed has been very focused on Main Street, very focused on making sure that inflation doesn't hit working people in their pocketbooks. And I think that is where the emphasis should be. Investors have made a lot of money in recent years. We're talking not about losses right now. We're talking about gains being given back. And I would note that aside from tech stocks and, some of the other sectors, there were, even at the end of this trading day, some gains in areas like industrials, real estate. So the sky is not falling yet. And I'm not too worried about Wall Street becoming poor.
So
real estate where people have money, right? So a lot of people that are in real estate, they have money. She mentioned that we should be concerned about the inflation not hitting, working people's pockets, but it's been hitting our pockets. People have been dealing with this for, I'd say, didn't we start talking about inflation like 2 years ago? So right after the war with Russia and Ukraine started. So the thing is like, that has been happening. So this is CNN trying to, again, they do this every time there's a possibility we're entering a recession. They never want to say the R word because they know it scares people and people freak out. But the reality is the stock market crashing is a big deal. Again, like I said, these numbers, these are record-breaking numbers. Look at this. I want to show you what they said here on Vox because I want to talk about the unemployment factor with the stock market. What caused the global stock market meltdown? Stock plunged across the world Monday. Does it mean the U.S. recession is looming? See, told you they don't really like to say the R word on corporate media too much. But listen to this. The Dow fell more than 1,000 points while the S&P 500 and NASDAQ were both down more than 3%, marking the S&P 550's biggest one-day drop since September 2022. Now that's going back to, we were still kind of dealing with remnants of the pandemic during that time. So the biggest drop since 2022. The slides came after Japan's Nikkei index had its worst day since its Black Monday crash of 1987, dropping 12.4%, and as European markets struggled as well. Now listen to this. The heavy losses signal that investors are rattled following reports last week showing that the U.S. had only added 114,000 jobs in July, below expectations of about 150,000, and that unemployment had risen 4.3%. We're going to highlight unemployment had risen 4.3% because what have I told you about the jobs? We created all these jobs. We created 200,000 jobs. But the unemployment rate rose to 4.3%. They have not been honest with you about the layoffs. I'm telling you who's laying people off. Independent media has been telling you who's laying people off. The Biden administration has not been honest with you about that. Anytime I'm seeing even tech companies, pharma companies, anytime I'm seeing all of these companies that have a lot of money laying off 600 workers, 300 workers, 400 workers, back to back to back to back, that signals that there is a problem. And they didn't want you to know about it. They have not been honest with you. And that's why they didn't tell you about it, because they didn't want people to freak out. They've been lying about the job numbers. They've been lying about unemployment. And then the stock market crashed. And that's the only reason some people are hearing about it now. It goes on to say this is higher than any month since October 2021. Again, that's during the pandemic. So we are seeing we are seeing unemployment numbers greater now than during the pandemic. Everybody needs to pay attention to this. I'm sorry, but this is just the reality. There's no pandemic right now. So what's the excuse now? These numbers are not in and of themselves a crisis. The unemployment rate is still relatively low and the underperformance in hiring isn't catastrophic, but both have been taken as signals that the U.S. economy might be showing some cracks. You think? Even though many economists projected that the U.S. would avoid a recession after the pandemic-induced economic slump, and despite the fact that it has done so, the reports reignited concerns that a U.S. recession could still happen, wreaking disastrous potential impacts across the global economy. On Monday, Goldman Sachs raised its odds of a recession occurring in the next year from 15% to 25%. It is impossible to say now how realistic those recession fears are, but it may be too early for a panic. The U.S. economy wasn't just supposed to be good. It actually is in pretty good shape. Well, we'll hear about that. Let's go to what Professor Richard Wolff has to say, because he has tried to warn people that this was coming. And this also shows you a big issue with capitalism, because this is what I've said time and time again. When people say, let's just put guardrails on capitalism, how do you even go about doing that? Right? You cannot have capitalism without some type of exploitation in place. Now, Richard Wolff, for the longest time, has continued to tell people that you need to move towards worker co-ops. I'm all support for unions. I support unions, but I've always told you that should just be the beginning. That is not the end game. And the reason is because these companies that you could decide to create a union at, these companies can outsource when they want to. We have also seen where unions, the management in these unions have turned on the workers. They've turned against the rank and file members. And if you don't own a piece of the company, which in a union you do not, in a worker cooperative you do, you are still at the behest of the CEO of that company. Richard Wolff breaks this down so great. Let's bring this in.
We left off, as I explained, that governments borrow because it's the politicians' cheap way out. That is, the politicians can give us no increase in taxes. You notice how they stumble over each other, promising that. Meanwhile, giving corporations what they want and giving the public as much as they can what they want. Why do they do that? Well, clearly, from the public, they need votes. And beyond a certain point, you can't tax people without them coming back and not voting for you. They've all learned that lesson. Corporations, it's a little different. If you tax them, they won't give you a money donations, pay for the lobbyists to do your job, give your party the money it needs for expensive TV ads, thereby jeopardizing your election. So the corporations know you're going to take care of them by not taxing them.
Yep.
And the corporations repay your kindness. They give you the big donations, the big contributions. And what do the politicians use them for? To not explain, or rather to explain falsely what's going on here. To hide from most of you what is in fact going on. Here is the key point. Corporations get out of paying their fair share, just like rich people do. All tax studies show you that. Take a look. I've done it on this program countless times. You should know. Corporations get out of paying taxes. Many of the biggest corporations pay no taxes year after year. The tax code is written to enable them to do that.
Such as Amazon and Netflix. Remember, they didn't pay taxes. I mean, they're able to just get away with this, right?
The same is with rich people. The most important single economic act of Donald Trump's 4 years in office was the tax cut of December 2017, which was an enormous gift to corporations and the rich. And that's the normal behavior. And Mr. Biden didn't undo that. Basically left it in place.
Yep.
Okay, so the corporations get a tax break and the rich do. And in return, they fund the politicians who do that.
Does everybody see the connection? But the workers don't get this tax break. Right? Like, we're not getting this type of tax break. And I'm so glad that he mentioned that Joe Biden decided to keep some of those tax breaks in place with the corporations, because this is the number thing that people leave out when people talk about, well, Trump gave these tax breaks to corporations, but they'll leave out that Biden also continued those tax breaks. So they're both for the Wall Street class.
And they give those politicians enough money so that they can run glitzy ads and hire lots of public relations people to make sure you don't understand what deficits and national debt actually mean. So here we go. When the government borrows, who do you think it borrows from? Has a government agent recently visited your home and asked you to lend to the government? Of course not.
That would be funny if they did. Knock on my door if you want to.
You have no idea about that because that doesn't happen to you. But if you're a big bank and you're a big corporation, you deal with the government and buy bonds, i.e. lend them money all the time. It's a normal part of big corporation activity. It's even a normal part of rich people's portfolio at their stockbroker, buying and selling government bonds. So here's the point. The corporations don't have to pay taxes, and the rich don't have to pay taxes because the politicians arrange it for them. Yeah. Then, of course, the government doesn't have those taxes. So what does the government do? Borrow, because it's not raising taxes from corporations and the rich. But from whom does it borrow? Here we go. Corporations and the rich. They're the major lenders to the government. What they lend to the government is what the government did not tax from them. If the government had taxed that money from them, the government wouldn't need to borrow. And if the government didn't need to borrow, we wouldn't have deficits and we wouldn't have a national debt.
Did everybody take that in? If the government did not need to borrow, we would not have a deficit and we would not have a national debt. What that means is the rich need to be taxed and pay their fair share. These corporations need to be taxed and pay their fair share. And we would not end up in this situation. We're paying the taxes. And rich people are just like, yeah, what, they're giving them all types of breaks. It doesn't make any sense. If someone makes $1 million a year, or let's go a little bit more extreme, if someone makes like $200 million a year and you make $35,000 a year, why are you paying taxes, but they're not? It does not make any sense. So ultimately, what has happened here is that the burden of taxes has been shifted to the working class. That is what they have done. And more people should be livid about this. We didn't talk about starting a movement. Maybe they need to be moving over this. Because again, why is it that the working class people have to pay taxes, but rich people don't have to pay what they're supposed to pay? I can't believe there aren't enough people angry about that.
So when you hear about deficits and debt, here's the key point. It's a sign that politicians have caved in to corporations and the rich. And we know how they do it. First of all, the tax laws are written to favor them. Then there are trillions, we've done the research, of assets held by corporations and the rich in places called, get it, tax havens. You know why they're called tax havens? And they include places like Caribbean islands or the state of North Dakota or all kinds. Or maybe it's South Dakota, one of them.
Those offshore accounts, right? So they have offshore accounts, more money in those accounts. And again, because it's an offshore account, it's just kind of like somewhat hidden.
There are all kinds of tax havens where you can go and hide your money and not pay taxes. That's the game, friends.
Yep.
The government says to corporations and the rich, you don't have to pay. Instead, you can lend the money to us. And of course, for corporations and the rich, this is a no-brainer. Rather than have your money taken as a tax, like we all do in our weekly check, instead of being taxed, you give that same amount of money to the government, same government, but it's a loan, and the government pays it back plus interest.
Plus interest. And here's something that we all need to think about. While we are angry with our working class neighbor, as I've said time and time again, rich people, and in particular, the billionaire class, they get away with murder in this country. They really do. Elon Musk, I know more people are more mad at him now than they were before when he first decided to purchase Twitter. A lot of people thought that he was going to be this free speech like advocate or whatever, but people are more mad at him now because they see that's not the case. But for people who jumped on the Elon Musk bandwagon and they were just like, oh, this guy's gonna be great. He's one of the good ones. Nah, he ain't paying no taxes either. These people are literally just getting away with it. So this is part of the exploitation, ladies and gentlemen, because if the billionaires were to pay what they're supposed to pay in taxes, this could end some of that exploitation. This should not even be allowed. But it is, because the billionaires own the corporations own the politicians, Wall Street owns the politicians. And so the politicians, instead of them doing for us and fighting for the working class, they fight for the billionaire class, because all of these people are linked together. That's why they don't do anything for the workers. That's why. They'll give you a little bit of crumbs. Like you'll be able to have like a union. Yeah, let's just help them start a union. Yay, pro-worker, woo. But this is why we don't have a living wage in this country. This is why they haven't increased the minimum wage in this country, is because of all these things. All these people are connected together. So I always say, if you really want to make a big change in electoral politics, you have to remove corporate money from electoral politics. It's all connected.
And where will the government get the money to pay back the lenders? plus interest. Well, from you and me, because we can't play that game. We don't have the money to lend the government. It is a scam and a ripoff, and it always has been. It is one of the greatest gifts modern capitalist governments give to their corporations and the rich. And if you haven't understood it, you now understand why you haven't understood it, why it hasn't been made clear. Don't get lost in the details. That's the core reality.
Everybody, let's remember what Professor Wolff said, because it is a scam. So every time you hear politicians complain about the deficit, the national debt, even right now, when you hear them complain about the stock market crash, etc., I want you to tie it all back to the billionaire class. And a lot of people don't want to do that because they depend on that billionaire class in some way, shape, or form. A lot of the politicians do. That's just a reality. Yeah, I like that, Brian. Unbillionaire the billionaires. Yeah. This is one thing I will say Bernie was right about when he said we have to get rid of. Now, do you see why people were saying get rid of the billionaires? Because they're not paying their fair share. They're not paying their fair share. They're exploiting the workers. They're making all this money and they're not even paying what they're supposed to pay for taxes because we're paying it. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. All right. I think I said this one already. I did. Yeah. Okay. Tamara, love your show, Sabby. Jill Stein for president. Thank you so much. Is it Tamara or Tamara? It's funny. I knew someone named Tamara and Tamara, but it's spelled the same way. Clint, another opportunity for the billionaire to scare the plebs and take their money. Exactly. All a scam. Shout out to CM for becoming a Sabby member. Give CM a big whoop, whoop. And thank you for the super sticker, CM, as well. Thank you, David. FYI, that game studio Bungie had their second wave of layoffs. The CEO bought $2 million in classic cars shortly before. Yes to worker co-op game studios. See that? Thank you for the super sticker, CM. Jamal Johnson, glad I finally caught you live. Hello and welcome, Jamal. And shout out to Radzo B. Harris for becoming a Sabby member. And thank you, Peter. Don't forget about the tariffs. That too. There you go. There you go. The billionaire class, fam. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Thank you very much. And we're moving on to our next story, ladies and gentlemen. Look, yesterday, shit went down in the UK. Like, seriously. Like, riots broke out. People broke into hotels. People were breaking into like the Holiday Inn. I was like, what is going on in the UK? There was chaos in the streets. Chaos in the streets. And I said, I have to cover this story because this is crazy. I want to talk about why this started to begin with, because the reporting that was first announced is that there are these extreme right-wing groups that are out on the streets and they're just attacking everybody in the UK. And I was like, let's see what prompted that. So let's get into this clip here from Sky News. I'm telling you, it's crazy in the UK right now.
Joining me from London is writer, broadcaster and presenter Esther Kraku. Esther, these are just such ugly scenes. Take us through how it started and how it's got so out of control.
These scenes that we're seeing are undoubtedly horrific, and the background story or what ignited them is even more so. So 3 young children and a dance teacher were fatally stabbed at a dance class, a Taylor Swift themed dance class in Southport last week. And there were...
Let me pause for a second. Yes, she said it was a Taylor Swift teen dance class. So there were 3 people that were stabbed there. Like, it's crazy.
rumors online, some have attributed it to Russian misinformation, that the person who stabbed these young children to death and stabbed 8 others who are still in critical condition in hospital was a Muslim that came across illegally on the small boats from France.
Pause. So everybody hear what started all of this? This is important to pay attention to. So what was said is that there was a Muslim person that came across the border illegally and apparently killed someone, and that's what prompted all this, right? So she is saying that is where the riots actually came from that rhetoric. But she also stated that people are saying that was not correct information. All right. Okay. Let's go back a little bit. And by the way, I want this green shirt. That is a pretty green shirt.
Was a Muslim that came across illegally on the small boats from France. Now we have been able to ascertain that the person who committed these atrocities allegedly is a 17-year-old boy and son of Rwandan immigrants. Now, nothing else is known of this person's background. There have been rumors that he suffered from some sort of mental health issue. We don't know anything. But this sort of whipped up a storm and has ignited the kind of sort of community fury that have led to these riots. Now, as you said in your monologue, which was excellent, by the way, there are a lot of these people that are just racist thugs that have nothing better to do, that are just trying to, defame and disgrace the memory of these children that were lost by attacking police, by burning cars and throwing rocks through buildings and businesses and mosques. But actually, like you said, there was a second story to this, which is this didn't happen in isolation. How did community relations break down to such an extent that we saw this effectively unrelated from what we know so far issue? And it's because of the decades-long protests by people in this country that are saying, listen, mass immigration is a massive issue. The lack of integration is a massive issue. Multiculturalism has failed. You cannot have people coming into this country without integrating. You cannot have people living parallel lives and effectively being allowed to do so by the liberal elite that have run this country since 1997, basically.
Pause. So does everybody see what's happening in the UK? So there apparently are at least enough people to cause riots in the streets that are very unhappy about the immigration situation. People that, and I agree with her when she said, I think some of those people were just racist to begin with. That's probably the case. And they probably use that as an excuse. But there have been a number of people that have chosen to seek out some type of violence to push back on immigration that is happening. Now, again, this is the UK. That's just our 51st state, if you want to call it that. I don't know. But I mean, it's very telling and it says something. But the violence that they decided to display, it was against people just based on race. Like, it's not like they went after that teenager who she described as having a mental health issue. It's not like they went after him. They went after anybody that was a person of color. They just started attacking people in the streets. Like, this was wild.
I mean, it's quite telling that when Keir Starmer went to lay wreaths to memorialize the deaths of these individuals that were lost at the dance class, there were people saying, shouting at him and heckling him, saying, who's next? If we can't protect our own children, who is next? Now, you couldn't have imagined that happening in 1997 when Tony Blair became prime minister, but it's indicative of how far community relations have broken down. You have communities that are living alongside each other that cannot stand each other. And the unfortunate and uncomfortable reality is we have let too many people into this country that, quite frankly, hate Britain.
Pause. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to have a deep conversation, and I'm glad we're going to have call in tonight. I think we need to really talk about this because I'm hearing similarities that we have here in the United States, right? First of all, Keir Starmer just became prime minister. Like, he literally just won. I feel like I just covered this story. And now we have this situation to deal with. So she is saying that we have people living in this country that can't stand living next door to each other. There are people in the UK, she said, that really just don't want people coming there that have issues with Britain. And I hear this, and although it's the UK, but I hear some of the same rhetoric here in the United States. And it makes me wonder, right? Is this us next? We haven't even gotten to the full footage yet. Just wait for that.
You didn't see this kind of rhetoric when the Rotherham gangs happened. Actually, when the Rotherham gangs happened, you didn't see any sort of riots. You didn't see, politicians storming out of Westminster, but you did see them storming out of Westminster in some sort of farcical theater when the Gaza vote happened a few months ago. And people are thinking, you don't care that white working class girls were abused systemically by these grooming gangs in places like Rotherham. You don't care. You didn't storm out of Westminster. Nothing happened. There was no, parade or grand show of anger. But when something like a Gaza vote, which is something that really is happening thousands of miles away from Britain, is happening, they storm out. And people are really getting a sense that the politicians running this country have not only betrayed us time and time again, but they fundamentally hate this country. And they're aiding and abetting people that hate this country. There's so many statistics with regards to policing and crime in this country that makes people feel like Britain is now a lawless place. Across 168 districts in London, areas in London, the Metropolitan Police have not solved one petty crime. That includes car thefts, burglary, in 3 years.
Does that sound familiar, ladies and gentlemen? Because she's venting right now like they went to the wrong one. Does that sound familiar? The number of times like I've complained that police aren't really solving any crime here in the United States. Politicians have betrayed the people, she has said. Does that sound familiar? Yeah.
You have protests that have been going on in the streets of London for months now that the police have just been letting go on, even though there are hateful chants, there are hateful things going on there. You have Islamist preachers on the streets of this country that are radicalizing people and teaching people how to attack and hate this country, and nothing has been done. And so while this act of vandalism and these riots by these thugs, as you rightly said, is horrible, it didn't happen in a vacuum. And now we have this uncomfortable conversation that we have to have, which is what has happened to this country? What has happened to community relations? How has multiculturalism failed? And how can we bring this country back together? Because I fear that if something doesn't happen, this will only be the beginning.
So let me pause here for a second and just say this. Now it goes back to the Israel talking point, right? So notice she said, we've had protests in the UK for months. Those are the pro-Palestinian protests. That's what she's referring to. There may have been others, but let's be real. For months, it's been the pro-Palestinian protests. I've covered those on the show. They've been all across the world, in particular London, right? So you see what she's trying to hint towards. She's like, we have Islamic preachers in the streets trying to radicalize people. So it sounds like similar talking points that we've been hearing here in the US by those who are pro-Israel that wanted to crack down on the protests that we've had here. Now, let's get into, because this is a doozy, right? Let's get into Sky News. This one from Sky News. There's a reporter who's in the streets, and I want you to hear what she is saying. Because you got to remember, again, a lot of times when I was waiting for her to say that, the first time I watched that video was about the protest. That's what it's really coming down to, folks. So they're trying to, this is an excuse for them to be able to use to say, well, a Muslim person came across the border and killed people in this country. And so people are all radicalized because of all the protests and the teachings in the streets in support of the Palestinian people. People are all radicalized and all kinds of things are happening. All kinds of people coming in this country and trying to radicalize and all that kind of stuff. And when she says people who are pro-Britain, I still feel like that's a disguise for pro-Israel, because we've heard people say that same rhetoric here in the United States, and they say you have to be pro-American, but then they'll turn around and say, oh yeah, Israel first. Is it America first or is it Israel first? So pay attention to that, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go ahead and bring in this reporter here. She's out on the streets. Listen to this.
There'd been rumours of a far-right protest in Birmingham, so dozens of Asian men decided to get here first. Many were wearing balaclavas or face masks, one man armed with what appeared to be a bat. This had been organised by men who've had enough of the violence towards Muslims.
This is now another.
So this is the other side that you get to hear from now, right? So these are Muslim residents in the UK, and they're like, yo, we're getting tired of this. We're tired of people just coming up and attacking us. Listen.
The group that's just been set.
Earlier, this community activist showed me a WhatsApp group with over 1,000 members wanting to stand up to racist mobs.
Hopefully the police will take care of us. But if they don't, we would obviously be willing to take care of ourselves.
And how far would you go to do that?
Well, me personally, you know, I'm not one of those elements that would go, I'm not willing to go to jail.
Good answer. Good answer. He let people know, look, I'm not one of the ones willing to go to jail. He remember, I'm on camera. Good answer.
It's the anger. He's been urging restraint.
The message that we are sending out as a community is that don't take the law into your own hands.
As protesters gathered and we attempted to report live, it became clear the media weren't welcome.
So you see what this reminds me of here? It reminds me of the counter protesters.
The media weren't.
The counter protesters that arrived at UCLA and started beating up the students that had the encampments outside UCLA. That's what this reminds me of. So here they are going after apparently Muslim people. I saw videos of a black guy being attacked, Asians being attacked. Like, this is insane. Like, it's crazy. These are basically race riots that are happening in the UK. Don't ask me about the UK police, because I don't know what's going on with all of that. But it's sad that it has come to this. It really is. And I point the fingers back towards like Israel, because there's so much hatred, and there already was some hatred for Muslim people. But as you notice in the UK, this is increasing now. Ay, ay, ay.
Welcome.
A sense of anger, I think you can hear there.
We decided to leave, but as we drove away, this man armed with a knife attempted to slash a tire.
Yeah, so we'll have to skip past that part for just a second. Yeah, so that guy tried to like slash the tire in a car. Like, it's just, and you'll see here, I'll bring in this video as well. This is crazy.
He witnessed has been caused by riots like this. An asylum hotel in Tamworth was set alight by a far-right mob. Trapped inside, asylum seekers filmed from the top floors.
Yeah, so this was a Holiday Inn in the UK that was attacked. This is crazy. Like, I mean, could you imagine if like you're in a hotel and all this starts to happen? But notice what she said. She said there are asylum seekers that are staying in that hotel. So now you have UK residents attacking asylum seekers. Again, where are the police? Right. So this is another example where I told you before that the police don't really prevent crime. Like, I don't. How many times to explain?
As outside, racist graffiti was left on the walls. By morning, the migrants had been moved away. Attempts underway to erase what had happened, but for many, the damage has been done. This nearby shop is run by a couple who now feel under threat.
Not many Asians live in Tamworth. We do feel a bit scared. We've never felt like this the way we are feeling now.
This hotel has been housing asylum seekers for years. The question now for those who provide support for the migrants is, should they return once the hotel is repaired?
If the hotel closes down as a result of the violence, then does that give those with a particular view a win? Or, is it about, obviously we want to make sure people are saved.
And that is the fear, with tension across communities still building by the...
There's a guy walking on top of the hold on. Look up at the top. Look at towards the left part of my screen here where there's the subway. And look on top of the subway. There's a guy on the roof of the subway. Look.
Across communities still building by the day. Becky Johnson, Sky.
Yeah, it's sad. It's unfortunate, you guys. I mean, I think there is a lot of ignorance surrounding whether it's people of different races, different cultures. I think there's a lot of ignorance in the world. And this is not just an issue in the United States. And some people aren't going to like this, but the reality is, as time goes on and as these wars continue, we are going to see more migration. And I'm not even talking about people migrating to the US or people migrating to the UK, but I even predict, and I said this a while back, I predict that more Americans are going to migrate. I predict that more, particularly the younger people, they are going to move and they are going to live in countries that are more affordable just because they can't afford to buy housing, like buy a house here, and the rent continues to increase. Nico said it when he was on the panel the other day. He said $400 for to rent a house in Brazil. So as an American, there's some of these countries that you can go to and you can live very well while you're trying to, pinch dollars here in the United States. As time goes on, more migration is going to continue. So the question is, what do we do about this? How do we learn to be more educated about different cultures, different issues? I'm not speaking for myself. I grew up around different people, but there is something happening there in the UK to the point where the Muslim couple that was in the store said they don't feel safe living there anymore. Something happening across the world, right? So Keir Starmer, again, who just became prime minister, did speak about this. Let's get into that.
I utterly condemn the far-right thuggery we've seen this weekend. Be in no doubt, those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests. Individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves.
Why do I not believe him? Why do I not take him seriously? I don't know what it is, but it's just something about him that I just feel do you guys really think he's going to round up all of them? Did you notice in the videos, a lot of them were wearing masks? So how are you going to find out who all those people were? I don't know, dude.
This is not protest. It is organised, violent thuggery. And it has no place on our streets or online. Right now, there are attacks happening on a hotel in Rotherham. Marauding gangs intent on law-breaking, or worse. Windows smashed, fire set ablaze, residents and staff in absolute fear. There is no justification, none, for taking this action. And all right-minded people should be condemning this sort of violence. People in this country have a right to be safe. And yet, we've seen Muslim communities targeted, attacks on mosques, other minority communities singled out, Nazi salutes in the street, attacks on the police, wanton violence alongside racist rhetoric. So no, I won't shy away from calling it what it is, far-right thuggery. To those who feel targeted because of the colour of your skin or your faith, I know how frightening this must be. I want you to know that this violent mob do not represent our country, and we will bring them to justice.
Let me just pause here for a second. You sure about that, Keir? Let's hear what.
And we will bring them to justice.
So, I don't know, Keir. I'm not convinced. I'm not afraid. I don't know. I'm Eminem right now. I'm not afraid. I don't know. I'm not shaking here. I don't know, Keir. I think that sentiment came from somewhere, right? I mean, because for the longest time, especially after October 7th, let's keep it real. Rishi Sunak, who was in that position, was making a lot of excuses for Israel, calling just about everything under the sun anti-Semitic. He was following the U.S. lead, what we were doing. So when you say this is not who we are, I don't know. I mean, you have the royal family. We can go through the history, boo, because I know a lot of it. We have the royal family. You have to think about some of the people that were members of the royal family. There was a Nazi member of the royal family, right? You have to think about some of the racism that took place in the royal family, not just the classism. Let's get down to it. I don't know. I don't really know. So it came from somewhere. It just reminds me when like Kamala Harris said this, and of course, Jim Clyburn said it, and Tim Scott said, America's not a racist country, remember? And Nikki Haley said that, and they were like, no, this is not who we are. I'm like, maybe this is who we are. I mean, like, America is a violent country. It was born on violence. Like, let's keep it real. So I don't know, Kier. Like, I'm just not convinced. I don't know. But the reality is, folks, like, it's very scary. It's very telling. And I think that at some point or another, there needs to be a deeper conversation about why people are migrating throughout the world, what is causing it. I always go back to the geopolitical conflict. I told you guys, like the wars and the sanctions on those countries and all that kind of stuff. But regardless of that, the amount of hatred that is on full display in the UK, just them all just going out, just attacking, people who are not white. It's crazy in 2024. Ay. And there's all different cultures that live in the UK. So not a good start to his position as prime minister. Not saying he caused that, but this is not a good start to his position. And it really goes to show you that although we talk about race in America, if you look at other countries as well, if you look at the UK, there's still a long way to go. Long way to go. Terry Hinton said it's the norm in 2024, Sabby. Yeah, I mean, I tell you guys, I feel like we're moving backwards instead of forwards, like as a society. What a mess. Let's get the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you. All righty. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin. Skip. As Americans move to other countries, we cause inflation and people of their country to pay much more for their own rent, food, etc. Yeah, this is true. I mean, it's happening all across the world. But I think that I continue to say, I think we are going to see more of that as time goes on. Like, I don't think that is something that is going to decrease. I think people are going to continue to migrate. Let's go to some of the comments here. Oh, I said that one. Thank you for the super chat, Macharius. Thanks for educating people. It's a public service. Thank you, Macharius. All right. Saka Papa says emerald green, Sabby. That was a beautiful green shirt. I love that color. P. Smith, member for 11 months. Shout out for that. Ropes are up 77. SA is up in 77% in France. Assaults against women in Germany, Ireland, and England are sky high. Yeah, what is going on? I feel like everyone's losing it. Bryce says they can track you with your cell, Sabby. Okay. And Colin says the international families I work with are affluent and many have moved back to Europe because it's too expensive here. Yeah, man. Yeah, I think that will continue. All right. Let's go ahead and dive into the next story. Woo! Speaking of things continuing, I don't know if you have heard about this, but apparently, you know that Iran has sounded the alarm that they are just basically waiting to issue a retaliatory attack against Israel. This is after Israel has killed one of the leaders of Hamas in Iran. Iran did respond and said that they will issue a retaliatory attack. So because of that, the U.S. government has basically been on high alert, and they have sent Navy ships over to the Middle East, just FYI. And now they are responding that they are preparing. And I want to bring this in for the people who continue to say that they feel Kamala Harris has a different position on this issue, because she does not. Today, POTUS and I met with our national security team to discuss developments in the Middle East. Our commitment to the security of Israel is unwavering as we prepare to support the defense of Israel against Iran and Iran-backed terrorist groups. We are also working to de-escalate regional tensions and prevent further conflict. We also discussed the steps we are taking to defend our forces and respond to any attack against our personnel in a manner and place of our choosing. This piece here, I think, is very damning for the people who tell me that Kamala has a different position as we prepare to support the defense of Israel against Iran and Iran-backed terrorist troops. And you can see this picture here. There's Kamala Harris, there's Joe Biden, there's Antony Blinken. They're all around the table. So again, more proof there that Kamala Harris does support defending Israel. But now they're talking about American troops defending Israel. And I warned people that this would happen if there was not an end to the genocide in Gaza, if there was not a permanent ceasefire. We would be headed in this direction. We have seen these tensions in the Middle East escalate, and now they are choosing to involve American troops. I told you they wanted to send your kids, your sons, your daughters, your friends, your significant others to go over there and to kill Arab people for their benefit. All of this to protect Israel. Like it is absolutely insane. I want to bring in this clip here from ABC News just to show you guys just how real it is getting in the Middle East.
Overseas now to the Middle East on high alert as Iran vows revenge for the assassination of a top Hamas leader in Tehran. The Biden administration promising additional military assets to help defend Israel, while the president is also trying to de-escalate tensions in the region. ABC's Matt Rivers in Tel Aviv tonight.
Tonight, the Biden administration bracing for a potential escalation in the Middle East. The Pentagon announcing it will deploy additional U.S. cruisers, destroyers, and fighter jets to protect Israel.
The secretary
to protect Israel. Right? So for all the people that jumped on the Kamala train, do you seriously think that if Kamala Harris wins the presidency, this is going to stop? Do you think they're not going to send American troops over there? Do you think that Kamala Harris will stop defending Israel? No, she's going to continue to defend Israel, which means that more Palestinians are going to be killed. Let's continue.
We will be directing multiple forthcoming force posture moves to bolster force protection.
It comes as Iran and its allies promise to retaliate following the assassination of top Hamas political official Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. In April,
we got to skip that part, sorry, and I have to fast forward. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, right about there. We can bring in that. There we go.
Another Iranian retaliation. Today, Haniyeh's funeral prayers taking place in Doha. Sources say Haniyeh was killed by an explosive smuggled into his room at an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps guest house. The device stashed inside roughly 2 months ago as part of an Israeli plot, as first reported by the New York Times. The assassination threatening to upend ceasefire negotiations between Israel and Hamas. President Biden saying he fears the violence could escalate.
Is the chance for a ceasefire ruined after the assassination of Haniyeh?
It's not helped.
So let me just chime in here for a second. He says it has not helped. That was on Israel. They're the ones that struck inside of Iran. The ceasefire could have been accomplished months ago. The U.S. government decided to drag this on. All it would have taken is for the United States to say, we are no longer going to send you weapons and arms. That's your ceasefire right there. The majority of the weapons they are getting from the U.S. I warn people that if this were to escalate with Iran, we would be heading closer towards World War III. Do you think Russia would not soon to jump in and to help Iran? I bet you they would. So we are in dangerous territory at this place in time. And at the same time, we have a presidential election. Like, this is one of those things. This is absurd. And you can see it here. The U.S. Navy likely to aid Israel in Iran's retaliatory strikes. So the U.S. Navy, they're bringing them in. All of this to protect Israel. It makes no sense to me. No sense to me. Israel is the aggressor. They have been the aggressor. Israel has been attacking Lebanon, Syria, Gaza, people in the West Bank, all over the Middle East. And that is who our government is choosing to protect. It's insane.
Tensions high in the Middle East as fears of Iran's retaliation strike against Israel continue to grow. The U.S. Embassy is warning all Americans to leave Lebanon. The State Department is also raising the security threat level to do not travel. And several international airlines are suspending flights to and from Lebanon and Israel. This comes as the Pentagon is deploying warships and fighter jets to that region. And the United Kingdom's Royal Air Force is putting transport helicopters on standby.
So did everybody hear that? This means more migration. So you see what I mean when I say migration is going to continue? Because if they're telling everybody they got to leave Lebanon, they're going to go somewhere. The U.S. government is telling people to leave Lebanon. They got to go somewhere. So again, we have to call out these wars that are happening.
Joining me now to help break it all down is News Nation senior national security contributor, retired Air Force Lieutenant General Richard Newton. Sir, good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Always good to be with you.
Good to have you here too, sir. You know, we get so worried when we see things like this, and I think that it helps for you to help assuage the fears of those at home who are trying to figure out exactly what's happened. Is this not a question of if, but when Iran will actually strike, and what will it mean to us here at home?
Well, Nick, I think the next several hours, or perhaps the next few days, it's very critical. It's a very dangerous time where I believe we're going to see unfold an escalation of conflict, if you will, between Israel and Iran. There's Prime Minister Netanyahu met with his national security team and his senior commanders last night. And so Iran certainly is poised right now on multiple fronts with its proxies being Hezbollah to the north in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in northern Yemen, and so forth, and from Iran to presumably strike back at Israel. And
let me pause here for a second, because I want to remind you, while all of this is in play, people are still starving in Gaza, right? So again, the genocide isn't just from the bombing. Part of the genocide is from starvation. So there's that as well. Now, they are saying that within 48 to 72 hours, they expect Iran to respond to Israel. Now, that is not to say that Israel could choose to respond to them first. They could choose to strike them again before Iran responds. But I don't care what amount of Navy, they're sending these Navy ships, these soldiers, they're sending them to their death. I don't care what amount of U.S. soldiers that you're sending over there to the Middle East. They're not going to be able to beat Iran. Do people understand how powerful their weapons are? This is why I tell you, get out of the military. Like, they're ready to send you over there to your death. That's basically what it is. You signing up for this, that's what you're signing up for.
so this is the highest tension I've seen since that Hamas slaughtered those 1,200 people back on October 7th. So high alert. The United States is responding also. President Biden will meet in the White House situation room with his national security team, as well as he is dispatching a United States Air Force F-22 squadron. He's going to move the aircraft carrier, the Abraham Lincoln, into the region as well. So all eyes are certainly on Israel, Iran right now.
And General Newton, break that down. Even though they have deployed those fighter jets, that does not mean that there will actually be American boots on the ground.
I don't anticipate American boots on the ground, but I do anticipate at sea, our men and women, from our naval forces as well as our air forces, much like we saw on April 13th when Iran, from 3 different directions, launched 320 or so ballistic missiles and drones against Israel. But nonetheless, it's the U.S. is bolstering our position, by the way, not only to support Israel, but also to protect. We have 40,000 troops in the Mideast. We also have approximately 2,500 in Iraq. We've got.
Let me pause here for a second. This just goes to show you again how they have all these U.S. troops in these countries, which is where they should not be. The U.S. needs to mind its own business. But also on top of that, when he asked them, are you going to put boots on the ground? Stop it with the boots on the ground, okay? Stop it with the boots on the ground. It doesn't matter if boots are on the ground if you have people by sea and by air, okay? Because when commentators say that, what they're trying to get you to believe is that the American troops are not going to kill anybody there. They're not going to end up killing any civilians. You can kill people by air and you can kill people by sea. Stop it with the boots on the ground. I'm so sick of that. That is the same rhetoric that Antony Blinken used and other State Department officials used when they tried to say, oh, well, we said that we wouldn't give them weapons if they sent in people on the ground. You see what I mean? So we can't fall for that rhetoric.
Got about 900 in Syria, 3,000 in Jordan. So right near that conflict area, it's very critical that we protect certainly our men and women in uniform and U.S. assets.
Got to take that part out. Sorry about that, guys, but you can't show the stuff in the sky. So I had to remove that part. But what I will say here, and I think it shows that through the end. Yeah. What I will say here is that we're in a very difficult situation because the reality is there's nothing stopping Iran for coming after the U.S. and basically telling the U.S. government, you know what, since you have decided to continue to give Israel those weapons in the first damn place, keep it up. There's nothing that is stopping Iran from saying that to the U.S. And everybody's so distracted by things like the Olympics, people are distracted by Taylor Swift, the Kardashians, and this is a serious issue. We cannot go to war with Iran. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not down for that. That being said, there is this constant rhetoric that Israel has the right to defend itself. But watch what Matt Miller says from the State Department when he is questioned by a journalist whether or not Iran has the right to defend itself. Listen to this.
And just on the question of an Iranian response. So in April, there was an attack on an Israeli attack on an Iranian diplomatic facility or consulate facility. I think at the time there was never a conclusion from the US whether it did count as a consulate facility or not. Now we've got an attack on Iranian territory. Do the Iranians have the right to self-defense in this case?
So I'm going to answer that question this way. The right is one question. What's productive is another. And ultimately, we don't think it's productive or conducive to anyone's interests, including Iran's, to conduct further actions, be they retaliatory or not.
In other words, the answer to that question is no. The State Department doesn't think that Iran has the right to defend itself. Did you hear what he said? Even if it's retaliatory. So again, they are willing to allow Israel to assault whoever they want, to bomb whoever they want, but you are not allowed to respond to them. And this is a big problem. You knew he was about to say no when he said, well, let me answer it this way. Whenever you hear someone say, oh, well, let me answer it this way, they're about to feed you a line of BS. That's usually what that means. If you go up to a friend and you say, hey, do you want to get pizza tonight or do you want to get tacos? Your friend's not going to say, well, let me answer it this way. No, they're just going to answer the question. So when you hear these talking heads say things like that, they're about to feed you a line of BS. So what he is telling you is that Israel has the right not only to defend itself, but they have the right to attack whoever they want, but you cannot defend yourself against Israel.
Any further action by Iran just raises the risk of increased tensions. It raises the risk of further response from Israel or from other parties, and ultimately gets us into this position that we have worried about from the beginning, that you get a conflict that can spiral out of control. Now, we are working to prevent that from happening, and I think the point that we are trying to make to all the parties involved is that they all have agency as well in trying to prevent that from becoming an eventuality. And so that requires all parties, including Iran, making the appropriate decisions in the days to come.
Now it's all parties need to make the appropriate decisions, including Iran. So you notice they won't say Israel, though. They'll say all parties. They will name Iran, but they won't name Israel. I don't know how Matt Miller, I don't know how this guy gets to sleep at night.
And that means not taking steps that could lead to a wider conflict. I think it's incumbent upon them to make those types of decisions.
In the interests of consistency, though, wouldn't your message to the Israelis is this is not helpful, or that's the president's words? I guess people would expect you to maybe go a bit further than to say this is not helpful when you're making these kind of requests of the Iranians not to respond.
I mean, the president said that he didn't believe it was helpful, and the secretary said on Thursday that all parties should stop taking escalatory actions. And I don't think we could be any more clear than that.
It's not helpful. Doesn't he look sneaky? Don't he look like just a slimy, sneaky little snake of a person, right? Don't he look sneaky? Listen, so it's like, again, our government is telling Iran, not just Iran, but they're telling this to Hezbollah too. Israel can do whatever they want to you, but you cannot respond. This is a big problem. It even gets to the point where even Antony Blinken, this goes to show you, because they know that we can't really come after Iran that way. Even Antony Blinken was calling for them to stop. I just want to go ahead and pull this one up here too, because I forgot to pull this one up. Yeah. Even he's kind of freaked out about this. Here it is right here. See, this is what I was trying to tell you guys. Let me pull this up here. Antony Blinken says Iran can produce fissile material for nuclear weapon in 1 or 2 weeks, says Antony Blinken. Does everybody see this? This is why, that's what I was trying to tell you. This is why, listen, some of us, when we were calling for a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire, it wasn't just a ceasefire for Gaza. It was all across the Middle East. Israel stopped bombing people because it eventually, obviously, Hezbollah is going to respond. Eventually, Iran is going to respond. Eventually, these other countries are going to respond to you. But no, some people didn't want a permanent ceasefire. The Biden administration wanted a temporary pause. And here we are. They let this drag on for way too long. This should have been over with. Again, come October, this will be a year. And they let it drag on. And that's how we got here, folks. Now, they can point fingers at everybody else if they want to, but the reality is this is how we got here. Because they were not willing to have a permanent ceasefire. Now, Antony Blinken's out there telling people, we informed Iran and Israel of the need not to escalate. Now, Antony Blinken does not want to escalate. But Antony Blinken wasn't thinking about that when Israel was the aggressor and the escalator. When Israel was killing all these damn civilians, he wasn't thinking about that. While they were killing people in Gaza, they were also bombing Hezbollah. They were bombing people in Lebanon. They were bombing people in Syria. The United States government sat up there and they let Israel get away with whatever they wanted to. They did not hold them accountable. And that's how we got here. Nobody ever checked Israel. That's how we got here, folks. Because if someone would have checked Israel, we would not be in this situation. So they can point fingers at whoever they want to, but the reality is you kept giving them those damn weapons. You never checked Israel, and that's how we got to this point. It is ridiculous. It is absolutely insane that they would even want to try to get us involved in any type of conflict with Iran. This is very dangerous, not just to the Middle East, but to the American people. And I'm not trying to sit up here and I'm not trying to die for Israel, boo. And I don't think you are too. I don't think you guys are willing to try to sit up here and die for Israel. This is a problem, and our government created it. We're going to have to keep an eye on this very closely, because the reality is, again, they said 48 to 72 hours. So I will be keeping an eye on this very closely, because if this continues, if things pop off, I don't know what to tell you guys. I don't care how many Navy, officers that they send to the Middle East. I don't care how many ships the U.S. sends to the Middle East. The reality is they know we can't beat Iran. Why do you think Anthony Blinken is saying everybody needs to de-escalate? You should have said that a long time ago, son. People are tired of Israel's BS. People are tired of Israel murdering people. And that's how we got here. And since most of the weapons came from the US government, Iran's looking at us like, and we blame you too. Even when the ICJ, the International Court, said to hold Israel accountable, the United States government snubbed their nose at the ICJ as if they're nothing. They snubbed their nose at international law. They snubbed their nose at the humanitarian rights organizations just to defend Israel. So I don't feel sorry for Anthony Blinken. I don't feel sorry for Kamala or Joe, because you guys sat up there and you let Israel do whatever they wanted to do. And that's how we got here. Let's get the comments on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you so much for the tip, I Rose. Thank you so much for the $10 tip on Rockfin. Violin says the ICJ got disrespected big time. Yep. Yes, they did. Big time. Let's go to some of the other comments. Thank you for the super chat, Ace Fest. The U.S. and Israel are in violation of international laws by illegally occupying Syria. So Americans and Israelis in Syria are target practice. Gilbert says, Sabs, there's a reason why Israel have so many F-35 jets. For the Middle East, they fly them like police chargers. Ravina says they don't care about us. Rich says we're the bad guys, always have been. And Crystal says Israel does not serve U.S. security interests. We are less safe. That's right. I'm telling you, they wrecking stuff. Their economy is getting wrecked too. All right, guys, go ahead and smash the like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share, Care Bears. And we're going to move on to 2 quick announcements. Yeah, fam. Okie dokie. Which one am I getting to first? Yes. Guys, big mutual aid event that we are doing here in Boston. This is the RBN Boston chapter. Again, one of the things that we do, those of us at the Revolutionary Blackout Network, is that we do mutual aid, right? So I told you guys again, no presidential candidate, no president is going to come and save you. You have to organize locally within your communities. And this is one of the things that we do. So August 18th, on a Sunday, 12 p.m. Eastern, we are hosting a back to school barbecue. We are donating school supplies to kids in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston. This is going to be at the Bruce C. Bowling Municipal Building, the first floor lobby, 2300 Washington Street, Roxbury. And we are also going to have a barbecue for them while we are there. Yeah, I'm excited about that. Again, We're doing pretty good. So our goal is 3,000. I actually might need to change that. I don't think I'll need 3,000. We're doing pretty good with the supplies. But our goal is 3,000. So far we've reached $705. And again, this is for school supplies and the barbecue for the kids in Roxbury. And shout out to my other comrades helping me with the RBN Boston chapter with the supplies, because like I said, Kate did a good job of pulling up the list that is needed for the kids in Roxbury. I was actually kind of surprised that they're asking kids to have all this stuff now, because when I was growing up, we didn't need all this stuff. They didn't ask my parents to get all this stuff, but now it's like more items that they're requiring kids to bring to school. It's kind of crazy. I'm like, how are they going to carry all this stuff in the book bag? But anyway, that is what it is. Sunday, August 18th. I'll be sure to share this with you guys. I'll put the link here. And I know one of you reached out and you said, can I put the link in the comment section of the video? So I'll do better about that too, because I know I'm not the best at doing that sometimes. So I'll also do that, because I guess, especially if you're not watching it live, then you may not see the link as well. So there's the link to the fundraiser, and shout out to all of you that have donated. And you don't have to put your name. Some people just write anonymous, and I understand that not everybody wants to know, they're donating something. But I'm looking forward to that event. And I also have another announcement for those who are not aware. I'm not having a live show on Thursday, and that's because I will be a part of this along with two of my comrades from RBN. This Thursday is Jill Stein's VP announcement rally. So that's Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Again, this will be virtual, so join me for that, folks. Who will be Jill Stein's running mate? That is going to be announced this Thursday. I also thought it was kind of cool that she decided to announce this the same week that Kamala announces hers. I thought that was actually smart. We'll be joined by a number of people here, including people like Ajamu Baraka, Jacqueline Lukeman, Tara Hooksa. Don't forget about Susan Abuhawa. And those of us from RBN, it'll be me, Nick, and a JB will be there as well. So definitely check that out. Eric, can you put the link to that in the chat? Because you do have to RSVP if you want to attend it. Otherwise, you can watch it on Jill Stein's YouTube channel. So you can watch it there. But some people do want to attend just because they want to ask questions. You can ask questions like in the chat if you are attending the webinar, but you do have to RSVP so that way they know the numbers that they have for that. So yeah. And we are getting to our final story, ladies and gentlemen. So of course, you probably heard the buzz by now. Kamala Harris has announced that her VP is Tim Walz. Let's go ahead and get into that announcement. I'm going to talk about the pros about Tim Walz. I'm going to talk about the cons. We're going to get into good, the bad, and the ugly. You're going to get a full picture here. And I'm not going to sit up here and be one of those people that were online that were like, oh my God, this is great. I'm so excited. Oh my God. And they didn't even check anything about this guy's record. So let's go ahead and get in here, ladies and gentlemen. Big announcement that happened earlier today.
Top of the hour, and the breaking news is big in this unprecedented campaign, this season the likes of which we have never seen before. We have one more major development. Vice President Kamala Harris, the presumptive Democratic nominee now for President of the United States, has selected Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be her running mate. Week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, maybe seen as a dark horse. Now he has emerged as the choice. Our MJ Lee, Jeff Zeleny, John King, Jamie Gangel, all reporting on this. MJ just saying maybe Walz, a vibes pick, seen as a Midwestern happy warrior. John King is here with us in New York, watching this unfold before our eyes. Let's just start, reset at the top of the hour. what Tim Walz means for this ticket now.
It means, number one, the Democrats have their ticket. They're about to go into their convention. And after Kamala Harris clinched the nomination with the most unorthodox nominating process of our lifetime, the President of the United States steps aside after winning the primaries. She wins a virtual voting among the delegates. And then she wants to make this decision. She wants all this cleaned up before they get to Chicago for the convention. So that can all be about prosecuting the case against Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and against the Republicans. So a very truncated process, a lot of pressure on the vice president. So as the voters out there get to judge, how she's handling this first big executive decision. So why Tim Walz? We're showing pictures of him right there in a jacket and a shirt with no tie on. Earlier we had pictures of him in a T-shirt. I do think the contrast here is going to be striking. This is a small town Midwesterner. This is a man who won a Republican House seat and held it. In very difficult years for Democrats, he held on to it. So he has that small town rural appeal, which is why did Donald Trump pick J.D. Vance? Sort of the same idea. Can you go into small communities and make the case? He's the chair.
Pause. So we're going to hold on to the red district that he won, because I'm going to show you recent polling that shows something a little bit different now, how he is doing in those particular red areas that he's referring to. So we're going to get into that as well. But the reality is, folks, Kamala Harris chose him because of a couple of reasons. One of those reasons, yes, that he was able to win in a Trump area. But the reality is he's in the Midwest. She chose him, or I shouldn't say she chose him. He was chosen for her, because the reality is Nancy Pelosi gave a public endorsement of Tim Walz on social media and in newspaper outlets. So did Bernie Sanders days prior to Kamala Harris having that final meeting with Tim Walz. So Democrat leadership, and I would say also the donor class, were the ones that decided who she should go with. That's usually how this goes. Let's stop pretending like she made this decision on her own. I want people to understand that. Two, he can help her win the Midwest. So that's one of the reasons why she decided to go with him instead of Josh Shapiro. Yes, Shapiro would help her with Pennsylvania, but the reality is someone like a Tim Walz could help her with the Minnesota and a Michigan and Wisconsin, right? So he is from Minnesota. So that's the idea there. But also, he is also selected to take the guilt of the genocide off of Kamala Harris, to put that solely on Joe Biden and put the focus on her as a fresh new face. And we'll get into that a little bit later when I get into his positions on Israel, some of them bad, some of them okay, but in some ways he has been a little to the left of Kamala Harris. So I'll get into that and break all of that down.
Chairman of the Democratic Governors Association, I can tell you his fellow Democratic governors love him, love him. They think he's smart. They think he builds consensus. They think he's really funny. And so they like being in his company. And that matters in a campaign. In terms of Harris being out, are you confident that do you have the loyalty and do you trust your partner out there in the campaign trail? Does that person at tense moments, and there will be a lot of tense moments in the next 90 days of this campaign, make you laugh and make you smile and maybe take some of the pressure off you? Can you do the small market television? Walz fits that bill. Now, we're going to see how he plays out. And again, I'll be a broken record on this. There is no data in the 37 years I've been doing this that says your vice presidential pick makes the difference in the end. However, it can hurt you. We could have a conversation about has Vance hurt Trump, or at least stalled Trump's momentum a little bit there? And it can help you in the idea that, again, popular with governors, that helps you raise money. Popular with governors, that helps get more people on the team. Popular in small town America, create a little buzz for Democrats in places maybe where they're not always seen. And that is one of the Democratic Party's problems. In the years I've been doing this, Michael Dukakis was my first campaign, 1988. He won 10 states.
Massachusetts miracle.
Iowa and West Virginia were states won by Michael Dukakis in 1988. Those who are blue-collar Democrats who worked with their hands on farms or in coal mines or in factories. The Democrats have lost those votes.
And why have they lost those votes? They've lost those votes because they decided to go along with the Goldman Sachs, Wall Street class. They became a part of that. They have been proposing politicians that are very much corporate, just over the top, like Ivy League candidates that they've been putting forward. They lost touch with the working class, everyday people. That's why they struggle in those states today. So that is a problem that you run into now with the Democratic Party.
And Walz knows how to win those votes. Again, The presidential candidate decides who wins the election. But a vice presidential candidate can help a little bit, and she's made a governing choice here too. A progressive governor who was in the military, in the House, then elected statewide and re-elected statewide. So you have governing experience here, again, in a different mix, a Midwestern mix. She's a West Coast politician. So it's an interesting combination. You know, politics, I always call it a casserole, right? You're bringing all these ingredients together and trying to make them work. The last thing I'll say is, in my travels over the last year, you know, one of the issues is people are so disillusioned with politics. That's why you have so-called double haters, people who don't like Trump and don't like Biden. Well, now President Biden's out of the race. So that gives the Democrats an opportunity. They have this opportunity to shake up the race, to get people to look again. So somebody who's a little different, a little unorthodox. Kamala Harris is different. She's a woman of color, right? So she's different in her own right. Now to bring somebody else different into the mix when you're trying to get another look, it's an interesting pick.
And let me stop here. So first of all, they are playing this guy up more than needs to be. I've covered Tim Walz on the show before. The first time was last year when he did pass. He signed into law the free lunch program for the kids, which I did applaud. But I think they are playing him up by saying he's a progressive. Tim Walz is not a progressive. I'm going to show you tonight reasons why. And I see a lot of people playing into this, and we really got to break things down. First of all, let's start with Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is going to tell you right here that he is not a progressive. So even Nancy Pelosi, who endorsed him publicly before he was chosen, is telling you he is not a progressive, which makes sense as to why Nancy Pelosi would have endorsed him. Wait till you see who else has endorsed him. Listen to this.
Tim Walz is wonderful. And she had many good choices among the 6 and certainly among the 2. I'm a big fan of Governor Shapiro. Tim Walz, I know very well. Let's say he served in the House. To characterize him as left is so unreal. It's just not what the question. He's right down the middle. He's a Heartland of America Democrat. And he was the chair of our Veterans Affairs Committee. And I don't want anybody to forget that, because he made tremendous, tremendous gains for our veterans, working with our folks on the Appropriations Committee and with the Speaker. We made more progress than had ever been made in the history of our country since the GI Bill under his leadership.
Okay, so you heard it from her yourself, folks. He is not left. He's not. Like, she said this on Morning Joe, and everybody just jumped. If you were on X earlier this morning, if you were on social media, everybody lost their damn mind. What drove me crazy is all the pro-Palestinian people, all the ones that were for that movement, even some of the ones that were out in the streets protesting. Once it was Tim Walz, they jumped like just immediately. I'm so excited. Oh my God, I'm so happy. None of them knowing his true record on Israel. None of them really looking into his background. All they knew was that he was one of the first politicians to call for a ceasefire. Yes, that is correct. But they did not look into his position on Israel, how he feels about Gaza. And I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to the party loyalist right now. Because if you are a party loyalist, I expect you to support your party, regardless of who the candidate is, whether that's Democrat or Republican. Not talking to you right now. However, if you are one of the activists that was a part of the pro-Palestinian protest that said you would not vote for Joe Biden, I'm talking to you right now. Because progressive, except Palestine, is not progressive. So stop. We'll start there. Stop calling Tim Walz progressive. He is not. Again, I blame this on Bernie Sanders and the squad, because they allowed the Democratic Party to water down what it means to be a true progressive. You cannot be progressive except Palestine. But the other warning to people was the endorsement from Joe Manchin. I don't understand how people didn't catch this one. So if Joe Manchin is praising Walz and refers to the word normalcy, that should tell you Tim is a moderate. Okay, so here is the statement from Joe Manchin. And he'll say here, He says, my friend Governor Tim Walz will bring normalcy back to the most chaotic political environment that most of us have ever seen. He says down here, I look forward to continuing to work with him to bring normalcy back to Washington. Okay, so what does that tell you? Okay, so stop calling him progressive. He is a moderate. What is really interesting is not only are you going to see corporate media admit what I just told you about why she picked him, but that people saw this and just it totally went over their heads. So we want to give a shout out to Hotspot. Here is Van Jones telling you one of the reasons why Kamala picked him. And I think this message went right over people's heads. Listen to this.
Do you think it was a little risky, though, Van, that she didn't go with Shapiro to kind of lock down Pennsylvania? I mean, yes, David Challenger was saying earlier, just because you pick him as your running mate doesn't mean you automatically win Pennsylvania. But I got to think it would have helped just a little bit.
Hey, listen, the conservatives, the right wing, the Republicans, they were chewing their fingernails down to the knuckle because they were afraid of a Josh Shapiro. They were afraid of a Mark Kelly. They're not as afraid of this new governor because they think they can define him. So here's the challenge you've got in this party. And people don't want to talk about it. We got to talk about it. On the one hand, you have a lot of young people who are concerned about Gaza. You have a lot of Muslims and Arabs and others. They have not felt seen by the Biden administration. You start hearing that genocide joke. That was building. And so those folks needed to have a candidate that they could feel comfortable with. This helps them in that regard. But you also have anti-Semitism that has gotten marbled into this party. You can be for the Palestinians without being an anti-Jewish bigot, but there are some anti-Jewish bigots out there. And there's some disquiet now, and there has to be. How much of what just happened is caving into some of these darker parts in the party? So that's going to have to get worked out. You've got in this party. And people don't want to talk about it. We got to talk about it. On the one hand, you have a lot of young people who are concerned about Gaza. You have a lot of Muslims and Arabs and others. They have not felt seen by the Biden administration. You start hearing that genocide joke. That was building. And so those folks needed to have a candidate that they could feel comfortable with. This helps them in that regard. But
did everybody catch that? So those folks needed to have a candidate that they felt comfortable with. So again, one of the reasons why she chose Tim Walz is because he basically brushes the genocide claim off of her because he was one of the first politicians to call for a ceasefire. So you see what I'm saying? They admitted this on corporate media and it went over a lot of people's heads. Kamala is just as complicit as Joe Biden is when it comes to the genocide in Gaza. Just as complicit. And people are just willing to overly, yay, she picked this guy. Oh my God, da-da-da. We'll get into that a little bit more, but I want to show you about how he fares in some of these small towns, because this was mentioned earlier by CNN. Kornacki says Tim Walz performing worse than Obama and worse than Biden in Minnesota small towns. See, this is the part they're not telling you. I told you, we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Listen to this.
Now, here's the key, because this county, Democrats used to be much more competitive in. Look at this. In 2012, Barack Obama won 43% of the vote in this county. It was only a little bit more than 10 points that he lost to Romney by here. The floor fell out for Democrats here when Trump came along in that Clinton race in 2016, and they haven't recovered it since. And that Walz performance here, it's a little less than Biden's number. It's more than Clinton's, and it's a far cry from what Obama was doing here. And again, I'm showing you one. This is a stand-in for dozens of counties in Minnesota where you...
Pause. So remember CNN said earlier that he was able to win in Trump areas. Now you are seeing that is not the case. When you compare it to Biden, Clinton, and Obama's performance in those same areas, you are noticing that he is not doing as well as they would have said. You see what I mean? So we got to talk about all pieces of the puzzle.
Saw the same thing with large rural populations, blue-collar white populations, where Obama, and some of them he was winning, others he was holding his own just a dozen years ago. This is where Democrats have lost ground. And Walz in 2022, he didn't gain any ground that the Democrats had lost. He didn't do that here. He didn't do that in other counties. Walz really owes his victory, that margin, he got 8 points there statewide. He owes it to the Twin Cities area here, the area where Democrats in Minnesota and all these other states are already doing well. It's sort of it's the standard Democratic victory model in a state like this. It got Walz in 2022. This is the biggest county in the state. This is where Minneapolis is. Hennepin County. Walz wins this by 44 points. Look at all the votes that came out of their total. It's
Pause. So what you're seeing when, the khaki guy, we call him the khaki guy, when the khaki guy pulls up the map, what you're seeing is there seems to be a little bit of exaggeration. Yes, he was able to win in some of the red areas, but when he pulls up the map, what you start to see is that this isn't any different from the other Democrat model that we typically see, which is where the Democrats typically perform better in the urban areas in the cities, and Republicans tend to perform better in the rural areas. Now, this is something to think about. The way that Trump was able to win Pennsylvania in 2016 is that he campaigned heavily in those rural areas of Pennsylvania that the Democrats neglected. And so those people overwhelmingly came out in support of Donald Trump. And that's how he was able to win in Pennsylvania, even though obviously the largest population in Pennsylvania is in Philadelphia. The Democrats neglected the rural communities. Let's go on a little bit more.
huge. And again, that's right in line with what Joe Biden did in 2020 when he won Minnesota. And again, just wind the clock back here. 12 years ago, this was still a blue county, but less blue. So it's the suburban areas, the metropolitan areas that have gotten much more blue. And Walz performed just like Biden did, better than Clinton did in places like this. And then in the rest of greater Minnesota, small town Minnesota, where the...
Pause. So you see this here, guys? They said he performed just like Joe Biden did in 2020.
Democrats have been losing ground. Walz performed basically just like Biden did as well. So, look at his electoral history. Tim Walz is in 2022. And the idea that he's got this automatic appeal with these small town areas in those three key battleground states, you don't see it in what he actually did on the ballot in 2022. Now,
okay. So that's important for people to see. So there is a slight exaggeration. This is not to say that he hasn't performed better than others in those particular parts, but there is a slight exaggeration when you look at the map that he just laid out. So let's start with the good, and then we'll go to the bad. Then we'll get to the ugly. So the good parts, there are some good things that he has done. And I want to pull this up here right now. Some of the policies Walz signed into law in Minnesota: universal meals, stronger labor protections, cannabis legalization, stronger LGBTQ plus protections, paid leave slash sick leave, 100% clean energy by 2030, reproductive rights, $1 billion for housing, gun safety, cut child poverty, a third of child poverty. And I also think that he also, there was one for college too. I thought he did a college. I believe he also, free college for those that are under $80,000. But anyway, there is nothing here that I disagree with. I agree with all of these things. I'm all for no child should go hungry in this country, period. We have plenty of money. And I also say, of course, I agree with, cannabis legalization. We have that here in Massachusetts. I agree with all of these things. So that being said, because this is the thing that's driving me crazy. A lot of people are pointing to this, but they don't want to point out some of the other things, which is what I'm going to show you on this show. But when I look at this looks like a standard, kind of reminds me standard Bernie-ish kind of, that kind of thing, but on the local level. But some of these things are just what liberals would do in general anyway, like stronger LGBTQ protections. That's something that a standard liberal would do, right? Gun safety, something a standard liberal would do. We can even say the child poverty thing, because the Democratic Party has already done this on the national level. We could say that is more of something a Democrat standard liberal may do, right? Same thing with stronger labor protections, et cetera. The things that kind of do stand out as a little bit more progressive would be the paid leave slash sick leave for everyone, and maybe the universal school meals. Now, I would argue those shouldn't even be progressive issues. That should just be something that we offer to people in this country regardless. But here we are. And there's this as well. So we're going to get to one of the things that he said about the uncommitted voters that I want people to hear. That was a positive at that point in time. Remember, we haven't gotten to the bad and the ugly yet. We're still on some of the good. So let's go ahead and bring this in here. Something that he said about the uncommitted voters earlier on.
40,000 votes right now, 20% of the vote going to uncommitted. And we've seen that already in this primary in Michigan. What message are voters in your state trying to send to President Biden? And what do you want to see President Biden do in response?
Yeah, look, they're engaged. We're really proud in Minnesota. Civic responsibility. We have some of the highest voter turnouts. These are voters that are deeply concerned, as we all are. The situation in Gaza is intolerable. And I think trying to find a solution, a lasting two-state solution, certainly the president's move towards humanitarian aid and asking us to get to a ceasefire, that's what they're asking to be heard. And that's what they should be doing. We've gone through this before, and we know that now we make sure we've got 8 months. We start bringing these folks back in. We listen to what they're saying. That's a healthy thing that's happening here. But I would note that that the former president lost twice as many votes here in Minnesota to Nikki Haley. And I've seen some of these exit polls out of North Carolina and others. 80% of folks said they're not voting for him who voted for Nikki Haley. We'll get these folks back. I think it's take them seriously. Their message is clear that they think this is an intolerable situation and that we can do more. And I think the president's hearing that.
Okay, so a lot of people took that part there from what he said about the uncommitted voters, and they said, yeah, he was right on the money about that early on, and he wanted to hear what the uncommitted voters had to say, and he took their concern seriously. They seem to have missed the part that he said at the end when he said, oh, we'll get these people back, you know, that kind of thing, right? So we'll get into that a little bit later. So a lot of people point to that and they say, well, he agreed that their concerns are serious, etc. So those are some of the good things about him. Now we're going to get to the bad. A lot of people heard that video and they just took it upon themselves to say he said this about the uncommitted voters and he decided to call for a ceasefire before other people did. So that's great for me. And they didn't look into his record. Candidate Claudia de la Cruz did. Now we're getting to the bad. Claudia de la Cruz and Karina Garcia said Tim Walz is a fake progressive sent to rescue the sinking Democratic Party. After Biden's meltdown, the Democrats are hoping to re-energize people with a supposedly progressive pick for Kamala Harris running mate. But what is his real record? So they're calling him again the fake progressive. I'm telling you guys, this guy's not progressive. Once you combine the bad with the good that he's done, you'll see he was basically just a moderate. So let's get to that. Tim Walz sides with big business. Did you guys know this? Walz vetoed a bill that would have established minimum pay rates for Uber and Lyft drivers. Harris's brother-in-law and top advisor, Tony West, is Uber's top lawyer. Everybody know that? Did you know that? Okay. Gotcha. Walz also gutted a bill to prevent hospitals from understaffing nurses by making healthcare giant Mayo Clinic exempt. So that is Tim Walz siding with big business. All the people jumping around and clapping and dancing, social media and all that kind of stuff. They didn't put this. And some of the independent media pundits aren't talking about this either. We'll get to that as well. Let's move on. There is more here. She goes on to say this, cracking down on protesters. He is the one who called in the National Guard to crack down on the uprising in the aftermath of the police murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. That was Tim Walz who did that. So for all the people that are anti-police, just remember that, right? And yeah, there's other things that he's done. You know, we'll also add that, yes, the trial with Derek Chauvin, he pushed for that. He did. But consider he's the one who sent in the damn cops and stuff after the, he should have done something. Okay? So we're going to, again, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll go to this part here. And this is the kicker. He is also a proud pro-Israel Democrat with a strong record of supporting the U.S.-Israel relationship. We're going to dive more into that. That is the ugly side of things, okay? We're still in the bad. These are the things people are not paying attention to. And I see a number of people falling for it, even pro-Palestinian activists. I saw them online today. I'm seeing independent media commentators falling for it, not looking into this guy's record, just saying he was the first to call for ceasefire. This guy is not who you think he is. Yes. Do I think that he is better than Shapiro on Israel? He's better than a little bit better on Shapiro on Israel. He didn't call the protesters like KKK and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, you're going to see that Tim Walz is still a Zionist when we get to that part. Still on the bad, not the ugly. For those of you who are against the war with Ukraine, when it comes to Ukraine, Tim Walz said this morning, I joined other governors to meet with President Zelensky and reaffirm our ongoing commitment to Ukraine. As Ukraine defends freedom against tyranny, Minnesota stands with our Ukrainian community and the people of Ukraine. So a Tim Walz, Kamala Harris administration, probably it looks like it will mean more money to Ukraine. Now, that's not important to everyone. Everyone doesn't care about the Ukraine issue. But if you do care about it, there's that. Now we're going to get to the ugly. Everybody wants to talk about all the good things he did in Minnesota. They don't want to talk about some of these bad things, like Line 3. How does the indigenous community feel about Tim Walz in Minnesota? Let's get into this. Treaty people organized walk across northern Minnesota to oppose Line 3. Now, remember who was behind all this. And we'll go down here. Listen to this. We're walking because Governor Tim Walz made a poor decision to permit Line 3 to violate treaties. That's coming from Carrie Chesnick, an enrolled member of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. We're walking for the next 7 generations. Again, Governor Tim Walz made a poor decision to permit Line 3 to violate treaties. So Governor Walz, what happened to all of us caring about indigenous land, protecting their treaties? But this is the guy that people are calling progressive. I don't know any progressive that would be okay with violating treaties. And we have to talk about what Line 3 was. We had a whole panel on this show and on RBN where indigenous activists came on and talked about Line 3 and what that meant to their communities. We're talking about more environmental pollution. We're talking about dirty water. So this is the guy that everybody says is progressive. Amy Klobuchar supported Line 3. We know she's not progressive. So how is this guy progressive? You're just going to walk all over the indigenous people like this? This is supposed to be okay? It says here, their collective voice was to demand that President Biden and Governor Walz honor treaties that both the federal and the state governments have with tribes. Treaty is the mechanism that is going to allow all of us to protect the water, the land, and the next 7 generations. There is so much destruction going on in the world, and our government can play a role in putting it into it. So, how is this going to work out if Governor Walz goes to Michigan with Kamala Harris, particularly over in the Flint area? Will they just avoid that area altogether? Because how are you going to stand up in front of people in Flint, Michigan and talk about, oh, we're going to help you with the water and we know you had dirty water and all that jazz when he approved Line 3? We just don't care about the indigenous people now? Is that what it is? Okay, we're still on the ugly. And then shout out to my comrade from RBN calling this out about Tim Walz. I told you, it's crazy when you get to the thick of it, fam. Tim Walz is a genocidal Zionist who opposes the BDF movement. Pull it up, fam. Look at this. His record on Israel. Here's some of the key points. I'm going to get deeper. Support for Israel. During his time in Congress, Walz consistently supported measures that affirmed the strong alliance between the U.S. and Israel. He voted in favor of resolutions and bills that reinforced the U.S. commitment to Israel's security. Do I expect that to change? No. Aid to Israel. Walz has supported continued U.S. military aid to Israel, recognizing its importance in maintaining Israel's security and its qualitative military edge in the region. So all the people that said he was one of the first to call for a ceasefire, what does that even mean? And does that even matter if you still support giving Israel the weapons? So if you calling for a ceasefire, but you're giving Israel the weapons, you put ceasefire and weapons together, and that means you're full of shit. Okay? This is all optics, folks. Don't fall for this. Two-state solution. Like many of his Democratic colleagues, Walz has expressed support for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Again, I told you about the two-state solution, right? I have a number of people that have come onto the show, and they have explained that the two-state solution is a moot point at this point in time. The years for that have long passed. He opposes BDS. Walz has opposed the BDS movement, which seeks to pressure Israel through economic and political means. He has supported legislation and resolutions condemning the BDS movement. Now, all you got to do is look at even the DSA handbook, even DSA, which is dim light. Even the DSA says in their handbook that you have to back the BDS movement. But he's a progressive? Okay. Let's go on. Because it gets crazier, fam. Like I told you, the good, the bad, the ugly. Wait till we get into this a little bit deeper here. Let's pull this up. Look at this. What does Tim Walz VP pick mean for American Jews and Israel? All right. So I don't want you guys to think that you're getting something different. And some people may get mad, but you just get mad because I'm not going to sit up here and lie to you. I'm going to give you the truth. Check this out. The decision to choose Walz is expected to bring back the Democratic ticket hundreds of thousands of people who voted uncommitted in the primaries and expressed outrage at Biden over the administration's support of Israel. So do you guys see what I told you? That's why she picked him. Remember, the uncommitted vote started in the Midwest. It started in Michigan. So they picked him to get those voters back. Is it? Like, okay, let's go on a little bit more here. A little bit more about him. It goes on to say, we're skipping through Shapiro. Okay, sorry. What are Walz's views on Israel and the war in Gaza? Look at this. While compared to Harris, Shapiro, and Kelly, Walz has no direct Jewish connections. American Jews are expected to overwhelmingly vote for the Democratic nominee, as they have historically. Progressives who cast uncommitted in the Democratic primaries this spring indicated they would be happier if Walz was picked. Does everybody see? Everybody see this, okay? And so for Black American voters who are watching, this is what I've been saying for a long time. I said, if you're going to vote for the Democratic Party, you at least need to get some concessions from it, right? Like make some demands. Let's continue. So you see what they did? So you see this, right? They pointed to his remarks on CNN after 19% of the Democrat electorate in the state's presidential primary participated in the protest vote. So that was part of it. Look at this. After October 7th, Walz ordered state flags to be flown at half staff to criticize those who did not condemn the attack. Listen to this. If you don't find moral clarity on Saturday morning and you find yourself waiting to think about what you needed to say, you need to reevaluate where you're at. He goes on to say here, this is where he said the ceasefire. In early March, Walz endorsed calls for a permanent working ceasefire just days after Harris drew praise from it. So you see, this was already in the works. This is what I was telling you guys. One other thing I wanted to say here, he visited Israel and the occupied West Bank on a diplomatic tour to the Middle East. He said he told the Israelis he believed that the growing number of Jewish settlements in the West Bank were hampering the prospects for peace. Listen to this. He spoke at the annual AIPAC policy conference in 2010 amid tensions between the Israeli government and the Obama administration. We'll get into that a little bit more. So you see, you think you're getting something different, but you're not really getting something that is that much different. Yes, again, he's not as overt about it as Shapiro. He hasn't said things as harshly as Shapiro. But make no mistake, fam. You're going to see he's just as much a Zionist. Now we're going to get to this right here. Check this out. This is coming from Yvonne Cohen. It has been an honor to work with Governor Walz on deepening the Israel-Minnesota partnership. So you see, what do people think they're getting? You're not getting something that much different. And again, I'm not talking to those of you that are the Democrat, party loyalists. I expect you to support the party regardless who the candidate is. I'm talking to those of you that were out in the streets protesting for Palestinian, solidarity, for their self-determination, calling for an end to occupation, calling for a permanent ceasefire, calling for an end to the oppression, and calling for an end to Zionism. A number of you just jumped on board and now are willing to back a Zionist. So I'm talking to you. All of a sudden, genocide is not a red line anymore. We'll go on. J Street is backing him. For those who are not aware, J Street is the liberal version of AIPAC. We know the Harris-Walz team will stand up for our shared values, protect our community, and pursue smart, pro-Israel, pro-peace leadership abroad. There is no pro-peace with Israel at the helm, the one who has been the aggressor. So do you see this? Here is J Street out here endorsing him. And all these people, Kyle Kalinske, Crystal Ball, all these people jumping around. This guy is way so progressive. He's to the left of Bernie. I haven't seen him say anything when it comes to Israel. I don't see him saying anything that Bernie didn't say. Bernie also called for a ceasefire. Let's go on. Here's another one. People aren't talking about this. While everyone is sharing the clip of Walz saying that Dems should be listened to uncommitted voters and the situation in Gaza is intolerable, here's an actual recent action on this, refusing to meet with Palestinians who lost their family in the genocide. See, nobody's talking about this. This just happened.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is Sanat Waswas from AMP. I'm standing here outside of the Minnesota State Capitol with our AMP members and Gaza families here from Minnesota. And I'm just here to tell you that we were supposed to meet with Governor Walz and our meeting got canceled. We met with the staff right before then, and they were under the impression that we were going to talk about our stories and just share our stories and cry and play the victimhood narrative. But as soon as we told them that we would not just share our victimhood, but talk about how we can materially affect change, how Governor Walz can and should divest from the SBI, that's when they decided to go deliberate, and then they came back and informed us that our meeting was canceled. They used the excuse that Governor Walz just wanted to hear families tell their stories, but didn't actually want to hear about the material changes, that this would be too long of a process. We know that this is a major excuse from Governor Walz. Families have been requesting to meet with him for months and months upon end. And as we reach the 10th month, and Governor Walz has refused to express any real, genuine solidarity with the Palestinian people, has refused to call for divestment, we see that this is clearly all talk, and this is just empty words from Governor Walz, that the real reason that they canceled the meeting is that they don't actually want to take any real effort to affect freedom and liberation for Palestine.
Everybody see this? She's right. They don't want to take any effort to affect freedom and liberation for the Palestinian people. So again, nobody's talking about this. All these people that jumped on board this train and said they are so excited. Tim Walz doesn't want to meet with the Palestinian family members in his state that lost their family in Gaza. And this is the guy that people are calling progressive. People just want someone so bad, they go with anything that's thrown in front of them. And some of you in independent left media, you're going along with it because you want to get paid. I call it like I see it. Let's continue. There's more. Because I'm telling you, we came with receipts. Check this out. Shout out to Z Squirrel doing the damn thing. Tim Walz joined Kamala Harris, Paul Ryan, and Mitch McConnell to condemn Obama, Pelosi, and Dianne Feinstein for not vetoing a purely symbolic UN Security Council resolution on the illegal settlements in the West Bank. He's a deranged Zionist fanatic. So you're going to find out more, but I told you, this is not a show for making people feel cozy and comfy at night. This is to tell you the truth. So it goes on to say, shout out again to Z Squirrel. In 2017, as her first foreign policy vote for resolution, she co-sponsored Kamala Harris joined Trump in criticizing Obama for daring to symbolically reprimand Israel at the UN for its illegal settlements. This is what Z Squirrel is referring to. And you can see that here. Look at this. Look at this. More AIPAC than J Street. Kamala Harris runs to the right on foreign policy. This is the progressive. People just want anyone to be their hero. This was 2019. So it just, look at all this. The Harris resolution called the UN version one-sided and effectively equated opposition to illegal colonization driven by Israel's right-wing government with opposition to Israel itself. Harris insisted that the UN should not have any role regarding Israel and Palestine. Her resolution asserts that the issue of these illegal settlements should be decided only through U.S.-sponsored direct talks between the Palestinians under occupation and their Israeli occupiers. In supporting the resolution, Harris sided with Republican Senate leader Mitch McConnell against fellow Democrat Senator Dianne Feinstein, and with Republican House leader Paul Ryan against Democratic House leader Nancy Pelosi. This is a troubling indication of who her foreign policy allies will be if she becomes president. We were warned about this in 2019. See, this is why I keep telling you these people are not progressive. They're wearing masks. They're trying to convince you they are, but they not. Kamala Harris also smeared BDS as anti-Semitic. I remember that, but let's go back to the original thread so we can stay on the Tim Walz thing here. In reality, there is no difference between genocidal Zionist queen Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, and Josh Shapiro. They're all the same. They're all Israel lobby AIPAC-owned fanatical Zionists, but pseudo-radical memers online want to pretend like he's a savior. And he's not. And here's another tweet here from 2023. And it shows you right here. Not the bad cop. Biden official says Harris won't shift course on supporting Israel. And I just don't know why people are falling for this. She's been very clear about who she is. So for all those people who said genocide was a red line, apparently it wasn't a red line for you. You don't have to vote for Trump. He's not going to be better on this issue either. Hell, you ain't got to come out at all. That's the thing. I don't understand why people feel they have to go with this party. You don't. And if it's a red line for you, you want to vote, support the candidates who are anti-duopoly, because they're the only ones. Support the third party or independent candidates that are against the genocide. I'm going to be supporting Jill Stein. I told you guys, Jill has been consistent on this issue since day one. And I told you all these, the Democrats and Republicans, they're all bought and paid for, whether it's AIPAC or J Street. They belong to the Israeli lobby. So you see what you have here. You think you're getting something, you're not getting what you think you're getting. This is a trick. This is a game. And people will come out and support them. And then you know what will happen? If they win, They'll just go back to not doing anything. Kamala Harris knows she wants to get the progressive base to come out to support her. She needs that, whatever's left of that Bernie Sanders progressive base, she needs that base to come out. So this is what she does. She picks a Tim Walz who called for a ceasefire. The media is focusing on that. They're all in on this together. So liberal corporate media chooses to focus on that. And that's what you're focused on. And none of them are showing you what I'm showing you. Think about that. Kamala Harris has no policies on her website still today. And people just jumped on board. You don't know what Kamala wants to do. People just fell in line like a bunch of sheep. You did exactly what the Democratic Party knew that you would do. Exactly what they knew that you would do. They took one of the massive movements that we had in the world, and they played their hand like this. Slowly, corporate media stopped talking about it. Stop talking about the protests. Stop giving it attention. They did this with the George Floyd protests. They used the same pattern every time. So then you're not focused on it as much. Then you're not thinking about it as much. Then the Olympics happens and all of a sudden your attention is turned there. Then Biden decides, he steps aside and they let Kamala run. They installed this woman right in front of you. None of you voted for her, and people just went along with it. And I'm willing to bet some of those people that said they weren't voting for Biden is not so much because of the genocide. It's more so because they wanted someone who wasn't as old. And now you see what's happening. So now just like that, and they're telling you she's progressive, and then they get her to pick Tim Walz, and he called for a ceasefire first. They'll tell you anything else about where he really stands when it comes to Israel, that he's not going to be any different when it comes to Israel. He's still going to support giving them weapons. They still going to give them weapons, and Israel will continue to kill Palestinian children. That's a reality. And a lot of people are going along with it. And so you see this here. So Z Squirrel goes on to say Tim Walz is a regular speaker at the Minnesota Israel lobby, where he said anyone who refuses to recognize the genocidal Israeli sexual assault torture entity is an anti-Semite. Just recently said he fully stands behind Israel's assault of genocide of Palestinians and wants the Zionists lobby to write the curriculum on Israel and Palestine to erase Palestinians from existence. This is your king? Is everybody paying attention to what this guy? Here it is right here. Jewish Community Relations Council. Here it is. Governor Walz also spoke about the importance of moral clarity, of standing in solidarity with Israel against Hamas. He wrote, here in the state of Minnesota, we stand firmly with the state of Israel and the righteousness of the cause. Listen to this, the highlighted part here. People's misunderstanding of what's happening or what has happened in the Middle East is just stunning in many cases. And I think that lack of information, that lack of knowledge, and the way people throw around certain terms or seem to try and rewrite history, it's apparent to me that what the JCRC, Dora, and many of the advocates in the room knew, we have got to educate, especially our young people, about the true story. We have to make sure they know. You see this? It goes on to say here, so to make sure, and the JCRC being there, making sure we're held accountable that this curriculum is correct and how it's being delivered is done right. So you're looking at censorship with this administration too, fam. Here they go trying to tap into, here you go trying to control the curriculum. So everybody see what's going on? It's happening right in front of you. Tim Walz is just as much a Zionist as these other people she was looking at. He's not different. The only difference is that he was quick to call for a ceasefire. So he's against you killing too many of them, but he's still okay with you killing them. And everybody, all these people online, they just fell for it. I couldn't believe it myself. I said, you guys have got to be, you're kidding me. You're kidding me. It goes on to say here, Tim Walz is a fanatical, deranged, fully owned Israel lobby plaything, exactly like Kamala Harris and Shapiro and all the other Democrats. There is no difference in policy that is going to happen with these freaks in charge. They're identical to Genocide Joe. Anyone who says otherwise with BS coconut memes is lying to you. They are liars, intentionally lying to you and pretending like there will be any difference. There will be no difference. It goes on to say here, both will keep supporting genocided Palestinians because they're owned by the Israeli lobby, like John Mersheimer just recently reiterated. As he says, without the U.S., Israel is nothing. All of these people are lying to you. Now, all of a sudden, people trust corporate media telling you that this guy is progressive. The same corporate media that lied to you about what was happening to the Palestinian people. Now, all of a sudden, they're trustworthy. Wake up, fam. Wake up, people. Even Mark Lamont Hill was falling for it. And I really got to call this one out. Mark Lamont Hill. Kamala Harris choosing Walz is very significant. It is a reminder that we can and must use our voice to get the outcomes we want. It also signals that VP Harris is listening to the voices of young grassroots pro-ceasefire and other voters. This is very encouraging. Mark Lamont Hill, which I invited him, those of us in RBN invited him for debate. We asked him publicly to debate him on this issue. Because I got some questions, fam. Because the same guy who sat up here since October 7th and streamed every day about Gaza, debated Zionists on multiple platforms, including his own, this guy who made his channel virtually almost nothing but Gaza since October 7th. The guy who got fired from CNN because he criticized Israel. The guy who voted for Jill Stein in 2016. Now, all of a sudden, he is willing to support Zionists in the Democratic Party. Now, I wasn't born last night. So something is happening around here. Where some of these people, I think some of them who may have jumped on this train because it was trending, because they could make money off of it, not to say he didn't care about the Palestinian people. I think he did. He's actually been over there from what I saw the pictures. I think he did care. But I also think he decided to give up. And that makes me wonder who spoke to Mark Lamont Hill. How do you go from I'm supporting the Green Party because they're correct on foreign policy, they're correct on calling out imperialism, they're correct on Israel and Gaza and the Palestinian people, to I am now going to support two Zionist Democrats. Make it make sense to me, fam. And I applauded Mark Lamont Hill for a lot of his coverage on Israel and Gaza. He was doing the damn thing. He really was. And just like that, and I ain't even trying to exaggerate, most of his channel is Israel and Gaza. That's it. You jumped right on camera after October 7th, and that was your everyday thing. Tell me I'm lying. And just like that, now all of a sudden, genocide don't matter. All of a sudden, it's no more red line. So now you're ready to jump onto the next thing. Let's go out there and be the Kamala supporter because that's trending and that's going to bring more followers to my channel and that's going to give me more money in my pocket. A lot of these people in left independent media, so-called left independent media, don't stand for a goddamn thing. All they want to do is make money and build a brand. And we challenged him to debate on this topic. I don't think that he would do it. He doesn't seem to be willing to have a conversation with someone to his left, but he can go smile up in Candace Owens' face. Call it like I see it. I am very pissed. I am very upset. Because him of all people, I didn't even get into, people said, well, Crystal and Kyle didn't talk about this every damn day since October 7th, okay? Like, you literally go to his channel and you see Gaza, day 107. Gaza, day 108. Gaza, day 10. They didn't talk about this every damn day, okay? They talked about it, but not the way that he did. And Crystal and Kyle did exactly what I told you that they would do. When they publicly came out and said they supported Jill Stein, I told you guys, once we got closer to November, they were going to go right back with the Democratic Party. And there were a couple of you that contacted me and said, no, Sabby, no, let's just accept the fact that they support Jill and take it as a win. You don't know these people like I do. Once you do this, you see how people move in this space. And I don't give a damn because I ain't trying to get any of them to come on any goddamn way. Don't you think it's a little bit strange that a lot of us that are to the left of them, you have never seen us on their show? Don't you think it's weird you've never seen them on this show? Don't you think it's weird? Mark Lamar Hill wouldn't even come on here. I call it like I see it. How dare you? And if I was Palestinian American, I'd be pissed as fuck because you rode that wave since October 7th and you probably did really well, fam. Your following just kept going up, 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 up. Woo! Look at all these subscribers just coming my way. And when the moment came just right for you and they decided to put Biden aside and install Kamala, now all of a sudden, let me jump onto the next new trending thing. I ain't got time for it, fam. I ain't got time for fake ones. People say, oh, Sabby PMC. Sabby has a master's degree. I have a master's degree, but my family's from B-More, bitch. I just can't. Of all the grifts that I've seen, it is incredibly low for you to just genocide is a red line. Let me walk away from that. That is incredibly low. That is the lowest of the lowest of the low. Because let it make sense, fam. You know goddamn well Kamala Harris is going to still give money to Israel. You know Tim Walz is going to be on board for that as well. He is a very smart person. Mark Lamont Hill has a PhD. He didn't wake up just yesterday. He knows how this game is played. He knows what's going to continue. And you out there telling people this is very encouraging. So it's encouraging for Palestinians to continue to die, or it's encouraging for your brand? Bree gets it. This is what Bree said here. This is true insofar as a Harris/anyone ticket is overwhelmingly likely to continue the last 75 years of American foreign policy with Israel. They wouldn't have coronated her if that weren't the case. And it's why the left should invest their energy in an anti-imperialist party. I know that the position that I'm taking is not a popular position. I know that it's not popular to support third party or independent candidates. I get it. But some of you only want to do things because it's popular or because it's trending. And that is not who I am. There have been a number of things I've done on this show that are not popular, but I still do them. And that's what it is. And I've been watching this for quite a long time. And Crystal and Kyle, them too. They jump on something when it's popular. You supported Jill Stein a couple of months ago when she was trending and she was building momentum. But the moment that Kamala Harris jumped into this race, you went right back to supporting the Democratic Party. And honestly, Jill's nicer than me. If I was Jill Stein, I would call y'all asses out. Because that's problematic. She's a lot nicer than me. People just ride in waves. No principles, no morals, just ride in that damn wave. to make money. You can do it the right way, or you can cheat and do it that way. But mark my words, I'd rather do it the right way and have things take time than to cheat and have that come back and bite me on the ass. And that's what a lot of people are doing. I've never fathomed this before in my life. You guys are so fucking low, you're willing to like turn your back on a genocide. That is disgusting. It is pathetic. And you should be ashamed of yourselves. And that goes for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz crazy ass too. They not going to do anything different than what you see that's already happening when it comes to Israel. So for the liberals who support the party, regardless of the candidate, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the pro-Palestinian protesters who said genocide was a red line. Apparently, it wasn't a damn red line for you too. And apparently, for some of you commentators, it wasn't a red line for you too. You were just going with what was popular at that time, and you don't stand for a goddamn thing. We are going to do call-in tonight. Eric's going to come on for just a second. I'm going to queue up the call-in link. And we'll go into call-in. You can do it, Eric. You can do the poll. Yeah. I'll let you bring it up.
All right. And I will do the poll. All right. Hello, ladies and gents. I am Eric T. Red. I'm usually in the background, but sometimes I jump in here. This is where we give Sabrina a little break before we jump over to our after show, formerly known as Call-In until Rumble shut down Call-In. But now we do it on Zoom. The cameras are optional. But we like to hear from everyone, and we'll be transitioning into that. We haven't put the link up yet because Sabrina is just making the room up now, but we will be getting you that link. In the meantime, let's check out that poll. Our poll question was, Kamala chose Tim Walz for VP. Does this help her beat Trump? And with over 1,500 votes in, we have yes, it helps her beat Trump at 22%. No, it doesn't help her beat Trump at 42%. We got 19% saying I'm not sure, and 17% saying the VP pick doesn't matter. So if you got opinions on this, you can come into Call-In, Zoom Hangout, that's kind of what I call it, and make your case. Personally, I think it helps. Just in a raw political sense, I think it helps a bit. Tim Walz seems to be someone who presents well enough, so I think just from that straight up angle, it kind of helps at least a bit. But there's also a good case to be made that the VP pick doesn't really matter much. Meanwhile, let's check out some of these super chats that have built up. Thanks for the super chat, Marvin Vargas. Economy going into recession is the only way to save it, or the only way to save it is war. UN Zio-globalists can try to stop BRICS. Getting at that idea that sometimes you basically have a big war to save an economy. I think that's certainly one of the theories around the Great Depression and World War II. I just think in general, the whole everything about the wars we're seeing and the militarism we're seeing it is really more like economics. It's all about the money is really, what I always say we should focus on. And that's the real reason things happen. Every bomb that's dropped on Gaza is profit for, a big military industrial complex company in Langley, Virginia, or some other place. The whole war is a racket. Thanks for the super sticker, Aaron Taylor. Appreciate it. And thanks for the super chat, Cynical. I hate the way they speak about news like it's a sports event. This is our real lives. People will die. But I guess for the oligarchs, this is a game. Yeah, I think I agree with that take. It's really, they see us as kind of like almost like a peasantry, that billionaire class. I mean, we don't interact with them. right? I mean, when was the last time you hung out with a billionaire? They live in a very different world, and they have a very different set of interests from those of the 99%. I think that's a really key part of understanding how this world works. There's the interests of the top 1%, the top 0.1%, even the billionaires, well, the 100 millionaires and their playthings, the mega corporations, they have one set of interests. And then the 99% have another set of interests. And right now, you know which set of interests our Congress and executive branch are working for, and it ain't ours. Thanks for the super chat, Ace Fest. If Nancy Pelosi endorses you, you must be horrific. Yeah, that's probably a pretty good test. Thanks for this one, Marvin Vargas. Kamala, woman of India, Ireland. Thanks, Judge Joe Brown. Yeah, I think he's referencing to how old Judge Joe Brown there has definitely been calling out Kamala in her past. Thanks for this one, Do Panic. Shaking my head. Willie Brown's chickhead wants to be president. All right. Thanks for that. And thanks for this super chat, Cool Blue 71. But Sabby, didn't the Kamala Harris launches her campaign for president video with a track of Beyonce's song Freedom move you? Yep. There was a good try, right? Cool Blue. And thanks for this one, Jay Tolbert. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker was on the list of running mates for Kamala. He's a billionaire version of Tim Walz, a full-on Zionist with some folks mistake for progressive due to his liberal policies. Yeah, I mean, they of course, this we don't even know what progressive means anymore. It's and that's part of what the corporate establishment does. Is it, they'll essentially redefine words to their liking, and to help the narrative. It's all about narrative. Thanks for this one, Cynical. They were always going to pick Walz. They were banding about Shapiro to make people nervous and take a deep breath of relief when she picked Walz. If it's not a game to the oligarchs, then it's theater. Yeah, I think there could be some truth to that. This whole Shapiro thing, so that when it did get to be Walz, people were like, oh, thank goodness they didn't pick the other one. It's a good game. And thanks for the super chat, David Giltonen. Principles over vibes all day, every day. Yep, you got that right, David. Thanks. Thanks for this one, Trusting Success. I like Hill and Jank, but I'm definitely giving them the side-eyed now, shaking my head. Well, you keep watching and listening here, and you'll be giving them more than a side eye. Thanks for the super sticker, Lorenzia. And also thanks for this one. Mark is a Kappa, D9 Boule Alliance, SMFH. Gotcha. Thanks for those. And thanks for the super chat, Cam 35 millimeter, for doing it the right way. Appreciate that, and appreciate everyone, their super chats and comments. And yeah, I mean, I'll just say here, it's there was also like the economy part that we had the story over earlier, and remember and when we get to the Zoom hangout, you can talk about any of the topics we had in the show, or really anything you want, but we want to hear from you. But there's this whole thing of like the economy is great, and yeah, it's great for Wall Street when Wall Street's booming, and it's great for the billionaires. One of the things that I wanted to just point out is that there's no, they talk about Wall Street and they'll have a crash like this, and they talk about losses. And, I think it's a misnomer. I mean, there really is no such thing as losses on Wall Street. All that's happening when they talk about losses is that the money is being transferred, and it's being transferred from out of the hands of the dupes who put in, their few $1,000 into Wall Street, and it ends up in the hands of the billionaire, that huge investor class. And that's what's always happening when you hear about, losses or a big bad day on Wall Street. It's transferring, and basically we're the dupes, or the 99% of the dupes who put their hard-earned cash into Wall Street, and then the billionaires cash it out, and then it's a crash. Who'd have thought it? And so, yeah, so I reject the term losses on Wall Street. Call it transfers.
All right.
All
You guys
right.
ready for calling?
Colin, I think they are.
All right. Let's do it. Let's do it.
For me.
Like I said, you guys they don't care about them damn kids. Okay, so that was the thing that drove me crazy. The people are like, oh, I just the kids. I'm seeing all these kids, and the kids are dying, and I can't take it. Apparently, you can take it because you're willing to support the administration. Remember, it would be different. It would be one thing if Kamala wasn't a part of the administration, but Kamala was literally a part of the administration, and they're just willing to go for it. Just willing to do it.
Now this time it's asking for the meeting passcode. Go ahead.
All right, let me put it up here then. Okay, the passcode. Let's go ahead and add that here. 236. I know sometimes it asks for it and sometimes it doesn't. Okay. Here is the passcode 236634. And let me go ahead and open up Zoom to make sure people can get in real quick too.
634.
All right. And I'll just make sure to close my other window here. Okay, looks like people are getting in. And if you do want to speak on the call in, you just raise your hand. And the way that you do that is you look at the bottom of the screen. You just click on reactions and then click on raise hand. That's how you raise your hand. We're going to ask everyone to mute. Everyone go ahead and mute, please. Mute. And let me actually start muting some people. If you're not speaking, you want to go ahead and mute.
You can make me co-host. I can mute people.
Okay, let me go ahead and do that. Make co-host. All right.
Let me see if I can quickly get this up on this new thing I was working on.
Okay. Make co-host. All right. Okay, great. All right, guys, I think we're going to go ahead and head on over to call in. It looks like people have signed in and I see some hands are raised. So let's go ahead and hit there. There's the passcode again if you need it. And I can also send it out via newsletter. I think a couple more people need to be muted, Eric, because I can hear Rook needs to be muted.
And this is the 6. Yeah, I'll get in there and do that. And then I think I just got this on the new site I've been working on. Yeah, that should work.
Based. All right, guys, I am heading out. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.